Chapter 1351. Strictly speaking, these two consciousnesses were born from the lost Fong, and they both had control over the lost Fong. The consciousness that was born from the sacred blood ritual of the 13 clans was obviously much stronger than the first consciousness that was born. Moreover, it had unified all the chaos in its consciousness and was no longer affected by the present. In terms of control over the lost Fong, it was able to suppress the first consciousness in an instant. The vines that imprisoned the giant hand were broken in an instant, and the hand slammed down again. I was just thinking of dealing with you after I've dealt with these two fellows. The consciousness that was born from the sacred blood ritual, let's call it the sacred blood as consciousness. Its voice slowly sounded. Speaking of which, I still have to thank you, because you brought me the opportunity to unify my consciousness. Otherwise, I don't know how many hundreds of years it would take for me to unify the chaos in my consciousness. Cain, who was barefoot and had the appearance of an old man who had lost both his eyes, regained his consciousness. At this time he was using all his strength to resist the attack of the holy blood. As well as he said seriously, we have discussed countless times. I just want to escape the fate of Cain. You can take my body, I just want to escape. Just like before, as long as you agree. I can share all of Cain's knowledge with you. You don't have to be wary of me anymore, because what I know you will also know. We have coexisted for a long time, so you should be able to clearly understand my essence. The sacred blood, as consciousness chuckled. I know you very well, but I don't believe in the former Cain. You were created by Cain in order to continue its existence. Perhaps even you yourself don't know if there's anything left behind by Cain in the depths of your soul. Even if there's only a 1 in a million chance, I don't want to see anything that could threaten me. The consciousness that was reborn sighed. Stop! There are some things that you have never known. Because of this, you don't know what you are dealing with now. Even if it was the former Cain, it wouldn't fight it head-on even if it was at its peak. Ha 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 ha. Sacred blood. S will suddenly laughed wildly. You don't even know how powerful I am after completely controlling the lost Fong. This is the first time I felt it. When my will was unified, every inch of my flesh and blood contained a huge amount of power. This indestructible body, even if the soul was annihilated, it could still remain intact and even preserve the vitality of the body. How powerful was it? The former, Cain, wasn't even worthy of using the lost Fong. Because of its weak will and soul, lost Fong was unable to unleash its full power. But, taking a deep breath, the will of Saint Blood opened his hands. I'm different from him. I want to be even stronger. I'll use the power of the lost Fong to its limit. Once I devour you and grasp all of Cain's knowledge, I'll explore the primordial origin. When the time comes, even if I encounter the Void Azura, I won't fall in such a low-level world like Cain. Perhaps the unification of the chaos wasn't a good thing for you. After all, it was the same as you unifying all the thoughts of the 13 clans. Those arrogant, narcissistic, cruel, or eccentric fellows. Have you forgotten how careful you were before you were united? Have you forgotten so quickly? Under the scouring of power, why have you swelled to such an extent? The reborn consciousness could not help but sigh. It's because you're useless. The will of Saint Blood sneered. You were born before me, but you didn't know the power of the lost Fong. But soon you'll feel its beauty. You'll be with me. In these countless dimensions, only one Cain's continuation is enough. The giant palm had already landed in front of the reborn consciousness. However, it suddenly gave up resisting and stopped interfering with the control of the lost Fong by the will of Saint Blood. In fact, it couldn't interfere to much at all. Even if it used all of its strength, it could only make the palm slightly stiffen for a moment. Perhaps everything will end perfectly like this. After I obtain all of Cain's knowledge and memories, I'll leave this world. This thought flashed through the will of Saint Blood, mind. As for its creator, the 13 clans, before it left, it would devour all of their power as a reward. Selfishness and heartlessness. This also originated from the creators of the 13 clans. You shouldn't go against your creators and even try to kill them. You must learn to be grateful. All of a sudden, a thunderous voice rang out in the consciousness of the will of the Saint Blood. This voice shook the sea of consciousness of the will of the Saint Blood to the point where it began to churn. Well done. You must eat those fellows, because I'm their ancestor. For the sake of their ancestor, this is what the descendants should do. Suck them dry. Suck them dry. Another enormous sound rang out. After that, a third, a fourth, and a seemingly endless sound surged in the sea of its consciousness, setting off enormous waves that overflowed to the heavens. In just an instant, in one of the 60 instants in the time it took to snap a finger, its entire sea of consciousness was on the verge of collapse. Ah! A sharp and painful cry rang through the entire lost rift. At this moment, while the will of Saint Blood was crying in pain, the palm of the lost Fang seemed to have rusted. It still continued to slap down, but it slowly stopped. It was as if a certain gear that was connected to the arm was rusted and couldn't fit together. The arm finally stopped moving. At this moment, the young man's face that was projected by the will of the Holy Blood began to wildly change. It covered its ears, and it couldn't even say a complete sentence. Only that painful roar could be heard. The projection of the will of Saint Blood was distorted. Like a melted candle, its whole body was flowing to different degrees. It clutched its face tightly, and one of its eyeballs bulged out as if it was about to explode. If any of you were to violate this principle, then the punishment would be a worse state than before. This was what Boss Luo said before it agreed to the agreement. You set me up. Luocio didn't speak, and his face was expressionless. He had given it time to think, and he had repeatedly reminded it that this wasn't his habit when dealing with customers. You set me up. I won't let you leave here. You'll be buried here together. With all the stubbornness of the 13 ancient families, it naturally had the craziest side. Therefore, the will of Saint Blood roared at the end, and the lost Fang, which had stopped moving, started to move again. But this time, when he activated it again, the huge palm began to break apart in an instant. First, the muscles of the palm, then the fingers. Pieces of the palm that were like huge rocks fell down, crazily. Under the impact of the huge fragments, the deep pit of corpses not only raised clouds of dust, but also shook crazily like an earthquake. Boom! When a piece of the palm fell on Luocio's head, it was blocked by something before it could touch his body, and then it turned into ashes. The palm that was much wider than the whole deep pit of corpses was now only as thick as a normal person's arm bone, and it extended all the way to the crack that appeared on it. The will of Saint Blood was now like a pile of mud, and it seemed to be desperately trying to integrate itself. The mud-like body projection and the two blood-red eyes stared at Sui Xiong at the same time. In the end, when this thin and long arm finally fell in front of Luocio, it was unknown whether it was blocked by Boss Luo's own defense or because it couldn't withstand such a ridiculous amount of damage. But this thin arm finally cracked into pieces. Seeing this, the will of Saint Blood stopped being crazy, and the mud-like body projection suddenly turned into a ball of irregular light. Like cells under a microscope, it escaped from the crack that extended from the palm. At this time, the reborn consciousness moved. It blocked the escape route of the will of Saint Blood, reached out its hand, and grabbed this ball of light. The will of the Holy Blood struggled crazily in the palm of the reborn consciousness. Fission, fission, fusion, fission, fusion. In the end, it stopped all fission and fusion, turning into a black sphere that looked like a rough ceramic embryo. The reborn consciousness held this ball with both hands and slowly exhaled. Is it over? It didn't remember how long it had been entangled with the will of Saint Blood. It had been too long, and it couldn't be counted in detail. It thought that this entanglement would end with its defeat. In the silence, it could feel that someone was approaching. Boss Luo and Miss Maid were approaching. When Boss Luo and Miss Maid finally arrived, the reborn consciousness slowly asked, "What are you going to do with it?" It slightly lifted the ball in its hand. Luocho just glanced at it and said casually, "Why should I deal with it? It doesn't belong to me." The reborn consciousness opened its mouth slightly, and after a short moment of silence, it slowly said, "It's in a very bad state now." The various consciousnesses that were already beginning to unify have been scattered again. Perhaps it will take a long time before a new consciousness is born. Are you going to wait for the next one to appear? The reborn consciousness shook its head and then nodded. "I want to try. If I teach it from the beginning, it will be very hard." Luocho smiled. The reborn consciousness said seriously, "Originally, most of its craziness was because the continuous Saint Blood ceremony brought too many expectations from the 13 families. I won't let the Saint Blood ceremony continue. Maybe it will work. Even if you're not sure, you still want to give it a try?" Luocho looked at its dark eyes. "Why don't you try?" The reborn consciousness didn't understand and asked back, "No matter what, it is the same as me. We were both born from the lost Fang. For me, it is equivalent to my brother. I should have shown the greatest kindness to my own brother." "You are right." Boss Luo smiled slightly. At this moment, the reborn consciousness suddenly faced the deep pit of the corpse. At the crack on the palm, it didn't move for a long time. A slight vibration began to spread, slowly. This kind of tremor wasn't strong, but it spread over a huge area. At this moment, in the inhuman territory, all the territories of the 13 clans that were connected by the Lost Rift could feel this slight tremor. The vampires in the 13 families in their territories didn't know what happened. Only the 13 Grand Dukes who were preparing for the Saint Blood ceremony woke up almost at the same time. Then the vampires in the 13 families could feel the anger from the Grand Dukes in their territories. It was a very strange thing, like some kind of crystal, but also like a liquid, like mercury, slightly viscous and hardened mercury. It was about the size of a millstone. It slowly rose from the crack in the corpse pit and finally came to the side of the reborn consciousness. "This is the Lost Fang." The reborn consciousness said slowly to the boss and Miss Maid, "Of course, you should know what it is better than me. After all, this is what Cain bought from you. The pseudo-eternal indestructible body." The information about this part naturally appeared in Luocho's mind. He looked at the pseudo-eternal indestructible eye, and then said calmly, "Now you can control it more freely. Congratulations." Unexpectedly, the reborn consciousness shook its head. "I don't plan to use it, and I don't even plan to hold it. After all, it is still Cain's thing. It will call to me no matter how far away I am from it, and this will only make me remember that I am still the continuation of Cain. So I will never know the answer to who I am. So..." The reborn consciousness waved its hand and slowly pushed the pseudo-eternal indestructible body to the front of Luocho. "I plan to return it to you, and because it is in your hands, my connection with it will be completely cut off. Then I think maybe it will make it easier for me to find the answer." Luocho opened his mouth slightly and pondered for a moment before saying, "You have to know that Cain bought it from us at the cost of his soul. Now, because of his death, Cain's soul has been automatically recovered. In fact, because of the pseudo-eternal indestructible body, during the long exploration journey, Cain's soul has become far more powerful than before, and its value is even more immeasurable. Now, if you return the pseudo-eternal indestructible body, even I feel like I have taken advantage of it." Then, the reborn consciousness said slowly, "I will use it to buy something." Chapter 1352. There was indeed an inseparable connection between the pseudo-eternal indestructible body and the reborn consciousness. No matter how long the distance was, or how much time had passed, this connection would not change. But When the pseudo-eternal indestructible body approached Luaccio, the connection between them had begun to weaken, and it continued to weaken. In just a moment, this solid connection seemed to have become a thin thread, which could be broken with a gentle pull. It seems that my judgment is right. The reborn consciousness had obviously noticed this change. I want to get rid of it, but at the same time, I don't want it to fall into someone's hands. Only in your hands, it's the safest. It probably relied on the power behind the club to isolate everything and ignore all prying a powerful barrier. So, Luaccio soon understood what the reborn consciousness wanted to buy from him. You want us to keep the pseudo-eternal indestructible body? The reborn consciousness nodded and said calmly, that's right. Only when it's in your hands will it be in the safest state, and the cost of keeping it is the body itself. As for the duration of keeping it, it's the day I die. Of course, if I need to use it during the process, I can take it out from your hands. Escrow service. Luaccio nodded. He had no objection to this kind of business, so he basically agreed without thinking. But before he agreed, Luaccio looked at the reborn consciousness and said, please think carefully about the value of the pseudo-eternal indestructible body, because you can't predict how long you have before you die. According to the reborn consciousness, even if it died tomorrow, or even half an hour later, the pseudo-eternal indestructible body would still enter the club's account and become the club's property. Of course, it originally came from the club and was sold by the previous owner. No need. The reborn consciousness shook its head. In fact, the sooner the decision is made, the better. More consideration will only waste more time. Then, let's sign the contract again. Luaccio didn't talk much nonsense. Although it was the first time he encountered such an escrow service, it didn't arouse his interest. At this moment, the reborn consciousness quite straightforwardly stamped its own mark on a new contract. When this contract took effect and then burned away, the transaction was already in a continuous state of effect. This pseudo-eternal indestructible body fell into Boss Luo's hands, and it began to shrink again little by little. It was originally the size of a millstone, but it didn't take long for it to shrink to the size of a rhombus crystal. The crystal gave out a colorful brilliance, but it was not hard. Instead, it was very soft. With a gentle pinch, it could change its original rhombus shape. I didn't expect it to shrink again. Although the reborn consciousness couldn't see things, it had the ability to know what was happening around it. I thought its original appearance. At this time, Boss Luo said, intentionally or unintentionally, strictly speaking, this is not a real pseudo-eternal indestructible body. Of course, it's not a real pseudo-eternal indestructible body. It's not a natural pseudo-eternal indestructible body. But don't worry, even if it's not a natural pseudo-eternal indestructible body, it's no different from a real pseudo-eternal indestructible body. Speaking of which, this is the first time I know that this thing can be done to this extent. You? The reborn consciousness frowned. Boss Luo just smiled and didn't say anything more, and didn't intend to tell the reborn consciousness that this pseudo-eternal indestructible body was actually synthesized from a special material, and this special material was called myriad element. The pseudo-eternal indestructible body that Cain bought back then was formed from a complete myriad essence organ. Of course, due to the nature of the myriad essence substance, once it was fixed in a certain form, it couldn't be reversed. But even so, the reborn consciousness seemed to have put down a huge burden. Compared to the time in the cave in the past, the reborn consciousness was obviously more active now. Because it was an entity of consciousness, this kind of fluctuation of consciousness could be easily felt. Boss Luo handed the item to Miss Maid for safekeeping and muttered to himself for a while, then suddenly said, although the contract has been signed and the business relationship has been established, but even the reborn consciousness couldn't help but feel a little nervous at this time. Its knowledge of the club came from Cain's knowledge legacy, and in this legacy many parts were about the mysteries of the shop, and before Cain encountered the fall of the Void Azura, he had made an extremely bold speculation. The shop might have been born in the original world, and the original, Kane had once asked the shop about this question and even proposed to buy information. It was just that, regarding the contents of the shop owner's asking price was infinitely higher than a pseudo-eternal indestructible body. As for the price he received from the shop when he proposed to buy the primordial waymark, the former Kane felt a brief moment of despair. Even so, the former Kane didn't give up on the idea of exploring the primordial waymark. For transcendents, or rather, individuals who had reached such a level of evolution, as they explored the dimensions, they would clearly sense a very unique calling. And the first transcendents who explored the dimensions didn't know what that calling was. They only clearly knew the name of the source of the calling, the primordial waymark. Why did they explore the primordial waymark? Why did they reach the primordial waymark? Some had pondered over it for thousands or even tens of thousands of years, but they still couldn't find the answer, as if the impulse to explore came from the depths of the soul. But in truth, no one had ever reached the primordial waymark, and yet all the information about the distance was superfluous. Every transcendent who explored the dimensions had a different reaction to the calling from the primordial waymark in their consciousness, and everything they sensed was different. That was why there had never been a case where transcendents gathered and pieced together any clues from the information they received. That was why Kane would ask such questions and leave behind the answers he received. Such knowledge was constantly warning the reborn consciousness that in the endless river of time, only that shop couldn't be conquered through brute force. The shop wouldn't attack any individual. And in theory, every individual who came to the shop would become its customer. It didn't even have a stance. As long as the rules of the trade were not violated, no one would have a good ending if the rules were violated. If one were to say that 100 years ago in the modern realm, when the elites of Euroland all came out to attack the shop, it was a small game, then in the endless river of time and space, there were also transcendents who came to attack the shop. The knowledge passed down from Kane indicated that Kane wasn't the first to speculate that the shop had an unusual relationship with the primordial waymark. A group of transcendents who became transcendents earlier than Kane had the same conjecture. A battle that covered the terrifying dimensions had occurred before Kane reached the level of transcendence, and there were no records of the final outcome. Even after exploring many dimensions, Kane could only guess from some clues. It was likely that the entire group of transcendents of the old generation had perished in battle. The dimensional crevice seemed to have formed after the Great War, as a battlefield of the Great War. And because of that, there was a period of stagnation in the exploration of dimensions for which no one knew how long, and all the transcendents of the old generation had disappeared without a trace. Until a certain point in time, a new generation of transcendents was born. It didn't have a name, but it was born naturally and was at the level of a transcendent when it was born. Since its birth, it had never announced its name, and no transcendents of the new generation had truly seen it appear. It was unknown when it started, but legends about it began to circulate among the new generation of transcendents. It was said that the first transcendent of the new generation had left behind a name, and that there were about 3,000 others like it. It was just lucky that it was the first to awaken. It had very mysteriously used the word awaken. Therefore, apart from the seemingly innate desire to explore the primordial waymark, searching for traces of the first transcendents of the new generation was another popular activity for many of the new generation of transcendents. Kane was considered a late addition to the new generation of transcendents. Most of the things he knew about the old generation were from the conversations of his seniors or from his own exploration. But there was one thing that Kane was very clear about, and that was that after the war of the old generation, everyone had disappeared without a trace, but this shop still existed. Its power was indescribable. The reborn consciousness couldn't even think of a word to describe the nature of such an existence. Therefore, when he heard the word "but" from Boss Luo, he couldn't help but feel nervous. But as for myself, I still feel that I owe it. After the reborn consciousness heard the sentence, he couldn't react for a while. Boss Luo just smiled faintly and said, "Actually, the main thing is that I like this past more." Although, at that moment, as Luochio was speaking, the entire pit of corpses began to undergo some strange changes. First, the place where the giant palm of the lost Fong appeared began to directly fill up. Then, just like in the inhuman domain, because the system that maintained the stability of the domain S structure would suddenly change due to an error, the domain S terrain would suddenly change. The whole pit of corpses had this kind of change in an instant. It was like a light that swept across from one side and then went to the other side like a barrier. The pit of corpses became the settlement that appeared in the past. They were made of bones, houses, and grayish-white paths. One could see the farmlands in the distance, and the cave where the reborn consciousness lived. Although these are nothing to the pseudo-eternal indestructible body as the final transaction fee, but I think a figure suddenly appeared on the street, carved out of white bones. It was a young man with a basket on his back. After the first man appeared, the figures on the road, in the houses, in the fields, and in the plaza also began to become clear one after another. But I think instead of letting this past exist only in the structure of your consciousness, it is better to let it have a more stable reality carrier. At first, the reborn consciousness could only feel all these changes, but gradually it seemed to see something. When the figures around it appeared one after another, when all the colors of this past could only exist in its consciousness and could not be seen with its own eyes, when everything was just colorless, color entered its sight. Just like that. The lost eyes were also restored in this change. The old appearance was also restored to its young appearance, almost the same appearance as the sacred blood, as will. Then there was sound, the sound of them talking. Then there was singing. In the house, the woman was gently rocking the cradle, softly singing a lullaby. Then there was the baby. In the cradle, the small figure began to fill up from being faint, from being almost transparent to gradually forming a shadow. Finally, it became complete. Of course, these are all calculated with the past in your consciousness as the basis. You don't need to continue to use a lot of energy to calculate these. I think this way, you should be able to have more time to think about the questions you want to answer. The reborn consciousness just subconsciously touched its face. Fingers, it saw the shape of the fingers, and it touched its eyelids. Why do you have to do this? It opened its mouth, and the only feeling it could find was confusion. Boss Luo just smiled casually and said, "Didn't I say that this way you don't need to spend too much energy to keep this past for those small, vengeful spirits? You can have more time to think about the answer to the question. Have you forgotten the content of the first contract between us?" The first contract. Before seizing this pseudo-eternal, indestructible body, the first deal they made in the cave of the past was to completely free the reborn consciousness from the entanglement of the sacred blood, S will. Now, the content of this deal as the sacred blood, S will return to its initial scattered state. The shop had actually completed its product. Next, it needed the reborn consciousness to pay for it. When this commission was completed, the reborn consciousness would hand over its soul after it became a real object. So, I think you don't need to thank me. I just did something that, if you see the essence, clearly might be annoying. Luaccio smiled slightly. After all, I'm still a businessman. Oh, right. In the end, Boss Luo waved his hand. In the deep pit of corpses, many skeletons suddenly emerged from the ground. They were scattered and shattered, but soon they separated again and then combined, finally becoming complete skeletons. They were human skeletons. In addition, there were also skeletons that were probably the skeletons of children. The skeletons of different sizes began to separate and then began to pair up. In the end, they were divided into many groups of 2s and 3s, and then they began to be embedded in different bone residences. These were the descendants of the ancients who had once lived here and escaped from the farm, and because of their ignorance and nature, they had once given birth to children. Boss Luo said softly at this time, "Although I don't intend to find the souls of their parents, after all, here the parents already exist, and they didn't bury their faces with their own hands. But I think it's better for the family to be more complete." At this time, the reborn consciousness looked at the settlement in front of it, which it created to allow those lonely souls like ghosts to have a place in the past. Looking at those lively souls who had accompanied it for a period of time, and the scene of them shuttling here under the company of their parents, it couldn't even tell the difference between real and fake. In the end, Boss Luo suddenly asked, "Don't you plan to give this place a name?" It subconsciously said, "Enoch. This place will be called Enoch from now on." Chapter 1353. A large amount of gray fog started to appear in the surroundings. The fog was not loose. Instead, it was like a thick wall. When one put his hand into the fog, he could feel that the fog was stagnant. This place was named Enoch by the reborn consciousness. This was the last gift from Boss Luo. With the fog, Enoch, which was surrounded by the fog, was like a paradise or something similar. Of course, the pit of corpses was still huge. Enoch, which was surrounded by the fog, only took up about a quarter of the space. The pit of corpses outside the fog still looked the same as before. As for the lost rift that connected the 13 ancient clans' territories, it looked exactly the same as before. However, the lost Fang was now an item in the shop. The reborn consciousness still had the right to take out the lost Fang or the pseudo-eternal indestructible body from the shop. However, the possibility of the reborn consciousness using the lost Fang was not high. Outside the fog, in a pile of corpses, suddenly, something came out of the pile of corpses. It should have violently broken the corpses that were on top of it. A loud bang was heard, followed by an angry roar. A golden dragon in a red suit stood on top of the white bones. It had regained some of its strength while it was unconscious, and at the same time, it remembered that it was in danger because of its lack of strength. The golden dragon felt that its dignity was greatly insulted. At this moment, some golden scales appeared on its cheeks, neck, and even arms. It opened its hands slightly with its palms facing up. 2 extremely red flames erupted from its palms. "I will definitely burn this place into purgatory," Fafnina roared angrily in her heart. Suddenly, she blinked her eyes. She was surprised to find something. For example, the vines seemed to have disappeared, and the surroundings returned to normal. Except for herself, there were gray corpses everywhere. The huge and exaggerated flames slowly dispersed. Fafnina put her palms on her eyebrows and looked around. "Beauty, Beauty, Beauty, where are you?" At this moment, there seemed to be movement coming from the bones, not far away. The golden dragon was overjoyed and rushed over. At the same time, 2 figures broke out from the pile of bones. "Beautiful." The golden dragon opened his mouth, but when he saw who it was, he realized that it was the vampire who called himself Norman and the ancient human girl, Mina. "Is that you?" It turned around and ran. The golden dragon's figure began to slowly fly above the pile of bones. It roared as it scanned its surroundings. Norman. Busby and the young girl, Mina, looked at each other and couldn't help but frown. "Brother, what happened just now?" Mina grabbed Busby's arm with lingering fear, her body trembling in fear. "It should be fine now." Busby comforted her in a low voice. Then he lifted the cloak on his back and pulled the girl into his arms, using the cloak to shield her. "I will protect you. Because of this, I became like this. Brother, more or less. Just send it here." At the edge of the thick fog, there was a passage that led directly to Ina. At this time, at the entrance of the passage, Boss Luo stopped the reborn consciousness. The reborn consciousness didn't force it. Sending them off was just out of courtesy. There was no protection at all. It was probably a waste of time to talk about escorting in front of the 2 people in front of him. After leaving the deep pit, walk in that direction. About 5 kilometers, there will be a cave. After passing through the cave, there will be a small path that leads to the surface. The location of the exit is probably at the edge of the Torito clan's farm. The reborn consciousness thought for a while and pointed out the direction. Although this situation might not be necessary for the other party, it was just out of courtesy. I see. Boss Luo nodded. It seems that the ancient humans who escaped here must have come here through this path. Was it opened by someone? The reborn consciousness shook his head. No, it was formed naturally. On one hand, Lost Fang's instinct to search for food broke through the soil layer. On the other hand, some unstable changes in the inhuman territory caused the terrain to become chaotic. Oh, right, there's one more thing. Luocho thought for a while and suddenly asked, You said that before we came here, you had seen a pair of lovers. Do you still remember their names? Although the reborn consciousness was surprised that the shop owner would be curious because of this, he didn't think much and said, Well, they weren't killed by the vines. They died because of love. On the way out of here, in the cave in front of the exit road. If I remember correctly, they were called Norman and Beakies. After they died, their souls wandered to me, but not long after, they disappeared. After seeing the resentful spirit of the child they killed with their own hands. That child? Luocho thought for a while and asked, It's the child who brought you here. The reborn consciousness smiled, then waved his hand. From the passage, a small figure slowly flew out and sat on his shoulder. Sure enough, it was the little resentful spirit that led Boss Luo and Miss Maid to the past cave. The reborn consciousness sighed at this time and said, They finally made a confession in front of this child, and then disappeared little by little. After that, this child was a little unstable, so I sealed its memory at that time. I didn't create past parents for it, and raised it myself. I only know so much about them. Luocho smiled and said, Don't worry, I just accidentally read the diary left by Norman before he was expelled, so I'm a little curious about what happened to them after that. I see. The reborn consciousness nodded, then seemed to think of something and said, After this child, they seem to have left the deep pit and lived in the cave. Not long after, they gave birth to another child. Oh. Boss Luo was thoughtful. The reborn consciousness said, But I haven't seen this child. This child seems to be born with some kind of special ability that can block my perception. Thank you for telling me. Boss Luo nodded gently. Then, if there's a chance, let's talk again. A few of our companions on this trip seem to have woken up. Take care. The reborn consciousness nodded. But just as Boss Luo and Miss Maid turned to leave, it suddenly called out, Please wait. Please say. The reborn consciousness hesitated for a moment and finally said, This is not a request. Remember that I once said that the former Cain encountered Shura of the Void in the crack of the dimension and finally died in this world? Boss Luo nodded. The reborn consciousness said, At that time, Cain had another companion with him who was also lost in this world. I think maybe you will meet in the future. At that time, I hope you can give some help. Of course, if he also needs it. If I can successfully introduce a buyer, I can waive a year's worth of property fees. Why do I have such a feeling? Boss Luo opened his mouth slightly and then nodded. Of course, we won't reject any customer. The reborn consciousness said, That's good. His name is Yang Jian, and he has a strong body comparable to the pseudo-eternal indestructible body. But it seems to be different from the way Cain obtained the pseudo-eternal indestructible body. It seems to be a special training method called sanctified body. I speculate that his soul may not have dissipated like Cain. Maybe he is just in a deep sleep. Also, he should have fallen into the real world of this world, not the inhuman domain. I don't know his approximate location either. Perhaps he has already recovered and left this world. Boss Luo said with a strange expression, The person you are talking about. Does he have a third eye on his forehead? That's right, how can you? The reborn consciousness was stunned, then reacted and said self-deprecatingly, I forgot about your intelligence. Anyway, if you meet him, please take care of him. Kane and Yang Jian have been together for a long time on the road of exploration, so they have some feelings for each other. Boss Luo smiled. Please rest assured, we will be careful in the future. After all, if he is the one I know, I think I will look forward to meeting him. People grow up to hate the water flowing east. In those years, Boss Luo, who was still a child and not a boss, was also one of the people who had been tortured. Then goodbye, customer. Boss Luo and Miss Maid bowed to each other and then turned to leave. The reborn consciousness sighed slowly, looked at the little vengeful spirit on his shoulder, and suddenly said in a low voice, "Do you still look forward to meeting them again?" The little vengeful spirit just blinked with a confused look. The reborn consciousness smiled. The same question seemed to have no answer to it. However, at this time, they who lived in Enoch appeared one by one. In groups of 2s and 3s, they appeared behind the reborn consciousness. Some brought their children, some accompanied by lovers, some carried farm tools. A group of people, everyone. Those little vengeful spirits. No matter if it was the parents in the past that it created, or those little vengeful spirits in the real world. The reborn consciousness looked at this scene in astonishment. This was not a calculation in its mind, and it did not even ask them to appear. Outside the passage, they stood there quietly, watching Boss Luo and Miss Maid leave gradually, and finally bowed together. You, the reborn consciousness, looked at this scene in a daze. Whether it was real or fake, it didn't seem to be important. Let's go back. It took a deep breath. We should have a celebration today. The passage gradually closed, and the thick fog began to gather. Finally, this place that no one could distinguish between real and fake was isolated from the world. In this way, Erlang split the Peach Mountain with an axe and then saved his mother. On the way back, Boss Luo simply told some of the story that he knew. Miss Maid was not fascinated by it, but because it was told by her master, it was naturally pleasant to hear. But Miss Maid knew about the heavenly palace mentioned in this story. Once he met the owner of the heavenly palace, and I also saw the owner of the heavenly palace from afar, but I didn't expect that he had a nephew. He met with the owner of the heavenly palace. Boss Luo imagined what kind of scene it would be. Then, this scene seemed to be a bit strange. In your opinion, what does the owner of the heavenly palace look like? Boss Luo asked curiously. How should I put it? Miss Maid blinked and said, Probably a guy with a long name. Puff. Boss Luo laughed out directly. That's right, the names of the gods in Taoist culture are indeed long, and there are more rare words. Oh, let's talk about this later. About 10 meters in front of him, something seemed to have started to emerge from a pile of bones. Just like a groundhog, a head directly popped out. Her head was wrapped tightly in a brown paper bag, and above it was a simple drawing of a human face with eyeliner. That's right, the one who popped her head out was Miss Witch. Boss Luo and Miss Maid looked at each other. Of course, they didn't almost forget about Maria. They walked in this direction because they knew that Maria was buried nearby. When Boss Luo and Miss Maid walked directly to Miss Witch, they saw Miss Witch struggling to climb out of the pile of bones in horror. Her body even trembled a little. At this time, when Miss Witch realized that someone was approaching her, she was startled at first and then shrank her body. She looked up at the two women, the female boss, in front of her, and then her eyes fell on Miss Maid, saying subconsciously, You seem to be the one who came to find my sister in the morning. Miss Maid frowned and said, You're my sister? I remember your name is Teresa. This Miss, which quickly said her name at this time. Chapter 1354. Maria the Witch once said that due to some special reasons, she temporarily shared a body with her younger sister, Teresa. The body originally belonged to her younger sister, Teresa. Ah, you're the mister from this morning? When she figured out the identities of the two people in front of her, Teresa recognized Miss Maid at first, and then she recognized Boss Luo after he spoke. Her eyes were wide open as she looked around, as if she had forgotten about the terrifying place she was in. If it weren't for the mask on her face, it was an ordinary paper bag, and Maria was afraid that she would accidentally break it or lose it on the way. So in order to obtain Master Pansy's potion, she put some glue in it with tears in her eyes to stabilize it. Her face would probably be very clear. Well, due to some special reasons, Boss Luo explained casually without any embarrassment or shyness. If that's the case, he glanced at Teresa and slowly asked, "Is Miss Maria asleep?" Teresa hesitated for a moment before nodding. Apart from the two people in front of her whom she had met once, everything else was so strange. Perhaps it was because of a sense of security that she couldn't explain. "Yes, sister is sleeping soundly this time. I called her several times, but she didn't respond. Did something happen to her?" "You don't know." Luocio was quite curious. The two sisters didn't seem to share the same senses. Sure enough, Teresa shook her head. "I'm not like my sister. When she came out, I couldn't stay awake. I don't have any magic power, and I can't use any magic. I'm just an ordinary person." Boss Luo thought for a while, and Miss Maid thought for a while. Then she glanced at Teresa, and the black flame directly burned the mask. Of course, it didn't hurt her at all. She didn't even have time to react. However, Luocio remembered that Maria seemed to have broken several ribs before she drove out the vengeful spirit that invaded her body and fell into a coma. But after the body became Teresa, she didn't seem to be injured. There wasn't even the slightest bit of magic in Teresa's body. Just as she had said, she was just a normal person. It seemed that it wasn't a simple matter of one soul going in and another soul coming out. It was a sudden exchange between two people. "Miss Teresa, have you been to the inhuman domain before?" Luocio suddenly asked. She subconsciously touched her face, but she felt as if something had caressed her face, but she didn't feel anything. She nodded and said, "How should I put it? Strictly speaking, my body has been here before, right? My sister said that the inhuman domain is too dangerous for ordinary people. So whenever my sister comes here, I'll usually fall asleep. Now that I think about it, my sister's words." She looked around the deep pit of corpses. The scene of white bones made her hair stand on end. She subconsciously hugged her arms. It was easy to squeeze out two spherical surfaces that were difficult to withstand. Although I occasionally hear Sister talk about some anecdotes in the inhuman domain, when I see it with my own eyes, do you feel scared? Boss Luo asked softly. "I do feel scared." Teresa nodded, but her expression was obviously more than that. "I never knew that the inhuman domain that my sister went to every time would be such a dangerous place. I thought that this was a fairy tale-like world, just like the magic world in J.K.'s novels. Are you scared of the inhuman domain?" Boss Luo asked again. "Yes." Teresa shook her head and said frankly, "Maybe it's because I occasionally chat with some magicians when I'm outside. I always feel that it's not a particularly scary thing." "That's good." Boss Luo smiled slightly. At this moment, a figure flew over from not far away. It was the golden dragon, who had a special hobby. From afar, they could hear Fafnir, shouting beauty loudly. As for the vampire and the young girl Mina, they also heard the commotion and came over. After meeting, they naturally greeted each other. "So, you don't know what happened?" Busby. Norman frowned. He had a feeling that the two people in front of him were not telling the truth. He had many concerns and doubts in his heart. From the beginning, when he fell into the Lost Rift, he already knew that these guys wearing the escort team's uniform were not real vampires. The reason why he didn't expose them at the beginning was that he judged that the danger in the Lost Rift was far greater than these impersonators of the escort team. It was not wise to have a conflict with them in the Lost Rift, so he didn't say anything and chose to leave this place first. On the other hand, Busby suspected that these three impersonators might be the intruders who broke into the farm in the morning. But considering that Bailey knew about this matter and his attitude was quite subtle, he was more inclined to choose to remain silent and not expose them. Even now, the lost Fong seemed to be strangely quiet, and he still intended to temporarily suppress these questions. Boss Luo just nodded and felt that he seemed to have a little talent in deceiving people, so he said, "Sincerely, we are not very familiar with this place. If possible, please explain more, Mr. Norman." Busby shook his head directly and said rather straightforwardly, "Now that the lost Fong has quieted down, let's leave this place quickly before it becomes active again. After leaving this deep pit, it will take another 10 minutes to reach the road to the surface. Let's go this way." As he said, he directly took the young girl Mina's arm and left. The direction was the way that Boss Luo and Miss Maid left before he regained consciousness. But Mr. Vampire probably didn't expect that after this time, the lost Fong would never be active again, because the lost Fong, or to be precise, the pseudo-eternal indestructible body, was in Boss Luo's bag at this time. It's almost night, right? Luocho glanced at the time on his mobile phone at this time. He and Miss Maid went to Miss Witch's magic house at about 10 o'clock in the morning, and then entered the inhuman domain, with the help of coordinates. Now the mobile phone showed that the time was 17:49. "You missed lunch and afternoon tea." Miss Maid said, "Are you hungry?" "Not really." Luocho smiled casually, "but I still want to eat the food you cook." "After reaching the surface, I will think of a way." Miss Maid chuckled. Just like that, they walked and chatted. Behind them, a pair of eyes full of resentment looked at them like this. Huang Jinlong didn't find a place to join the conversation from the beginning. The special emotional columnist of Inhuman newspaper, Moreau-chan, seemed to lack practical experience in this field and was quite short of money. She silently followed behind, and several times she wanted to say something, but stopped. "Speaking of which, who are you?" Finally, Huang Jinlong, who wanted to strike up a conversation but failed, finally noticed that there was Teresa, who had been quietly removed by Miss Maid. He couldn't help but frown. "Why do you have such a shameful chest? I seem to have seen it somewhere." "Forget it. I'm not interested in ugly girls. You can hide aside." Teresa opened her mouth. Every time her sister entered the inhuman domain, she would have to deal with so many weird guys. It's really hard, speaking of which. I can't say that I'm ugly, right? As for the problem of the chest, it's already very troublesome. Unknowingly, this group of people had climbed up the deep pit of corpses and then moved toward the cave that could lead to the surface. But soon after, the deep pit of corpses welcomed several figures. At first, 3 figures arrived almost at the same time. Then another 5 figures arrived, and finally another 4 figures arrived. A total of 12 figures gathered in the deep pit of corpses at this time. They came from the inhuman domain, the Grand Dukes of the 12 clans of the 13 clans. Except for the Grand Duke of Torito, everyone is here? One of the 12 Grand Dukes frowned at this time. That guy still hasn't woken up after such a big thing happened? Isn't he too lazy? Another Grand Duke looked up at this time. This deep pit of corpses was under the territory of Torito clan. In fact, these Grand Dukes could sense that the Grand Duke of Torito was in the depths of the mountain above. At least his aura was not wrong. He didn't attend the last Grand Duke's meeting, and only sent Beilegan to attend on his behalf. The Grand Duke pondered and said, "The reaction of the lost Fong was that it disappeared in the territory of the Torito family. Did this guy do something behind our backs? What is this?" At this time, another Grand Duke was looking at the thick fog in the deep pit of corpses that shouldn't be there. At this time, a few Grand Dukes circled this place that was surrounded by the thick fog at an extremely fast speed and returned. "We didn't find the entrance, and we don't even seem to have a weak point." With that said, another Grand Duke waved his hand tentatively and shot out a dark red light wave. The moment the light wave shot into the thick fog, it disappeared without a trace like a clay ox entering the sea. This Grand Duke didn't believe it, and at this time he snorted coldly and chanted an ancient language loudly. On both of his arms, dark red engravings appeared. In the end, A gigantic beam of light as thick as a meter shot out from its hands. The gigantic beam of light, once again, disappeared into the thick fog. At this time, the Grand Dukes couldn't help but feel shocked. The one who launched the attack had obviously made a serious move. And the attack just now was enough to destroy the land within a radius of 100 meters. At this moment, the Grand Dukes couldn't help but fall into silence. After a while, a Grand Duke broke the silence. Everyone, I believe that you all came here because you suddenly lost the connection with the holy blood that was created by the consciousness of the holy blood. This burning sensation is like a part of your consciousness being directly cut off by someone. I don't think you're mistaken. What happened? Or should I say, who did this to Lost Fong? Could it be that Torito guy? This was its territory, and the incident had happened in its territory. Furthermore, there was this strange fog. Could there be something inside? Before I left, I heard that a few hours ago the territory of Torito clan was invaded by the Golden Dragon, and even their headquarters castle was destroyed into ruins, a Grand Duke suddenly said at this time. The last Golden Dragon? How is it related to that guy again? One of the Grand Dukes was impatient or easily angered, and his voice became gloomy at this moment. If they were related to the Golden Dragon, they would eventually be related to the Magician Association. As for the Magician Association, there was a first Tower Master in the Inhuman Realm, and almost all of the Inhuman Realm is Inhuman Realm. Didn't want to confront the first Tower Master directly. The first Tower Master was the one who built the most stable foundation of the Inhuman Realm, and he was invincible in the Inhuman Realm from the very beginning. If the first Tower Master wanted to escape, no one could find him in the Inhuman Realm. As for those who the first Tower Master could defeat, they would be fine. In fact, in the Inhuman Realm, no one had heard of anyone who could directly confront the first Tower Master of the secret Technique Tower. Although the Grand Dukes of the 13 clans never said it out loud, they all knew that in front of the first Tower Master, even though the Grand Dukes of the 13 clans could stand at the top of the Inhuman domain, they were still just a little brother. Otherwise, with the countless years of grudges between the 13 clans and the werewolves, the two clans wouldn't have been able to live peacefully in the Inhuman domain for hundreds of years. In the war 100 years ago, the two races even formed a team for the first time. All of this was facilitated by the first Tower Master. At this moment, the 12 Grand Dukes who rushed here as soon as they sensed that something was wrong felt like disaster had fallen from the sky while they were sitting at home. Perhaps we should find the guy who's absent and ask him about it. A Grand Duke who was calm said slowly, "We can't let all of our efforts go to waste. The sacred blood ceremony has been going on for such a long time, and that consciousness can already control the lost Fong." That's right. Another Grand Duke gritted his teeth. No matter what, we can't give up on the lost Fong. This is our only chance to take revenge on that abominable nightmare-eating tapir. I'll never forget the humiliation that Erex brought to me. With that, the Grand Duke rushed into the sky. This was the territory of the Torito clan, and the most direct way to the place where Grand Duke Torito was sleeping was to break into the mountain. Perhaps because of their anger, these Grand Dukes didn't care too much about the etiquette of the 13 ancient families. It didn't take long for the hard rocks to be broken under the claws of the furious Grand Dukes like mud bricks. Soon, the 12 Grand Dukes broke out an entrance and entered an ancient cave. In the cave, a huge bronze coffin was hanging in the center of the ancient cave with 12 chains. The 12 Grand Dukes broke into this place like a group of boorish men breaking into a young girl's boudoir, but the girl in the boudoir still didn't respond. They couldn't help but feel that something was wrong, so they opened the huge bronze coffin hanging above. The moment the huge bronze coffin opened, what appeared in front of the 12 Grand Dukes was a very simple scarecrow. On the scarecrow, there was a piece of white paper with the word Grand Duke written on it. The handwriting is quite good. No, what's going on? Chapter 1355. The Scarecrow with the word Grand Duke was lying quietly in the giant bronze coffin. The 12 Grand Dukes were at a loss of what to do about this strange situation. In an instant, many possibilities appeared in their minds. For example, could this be a prank by Grand Duke Torito? Or could it be that Grand Duke Torito did this on purpose? He might have done something to the lost Fong, so he escaped before the Grand Dukes arrived. No. Why does this scarecrow have the same aura as Torito? One of the Grand Dukes frowned. In the next moment, he cut open the scarecrow in the giant bronze coffin. An ancient black wooden box was hidden in the scarecrow's body. Obviously, Grand Duke Torito's aura came from this black wooden box. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they would have thought that Grand Duke Torido was here and hadn't moved at all. Another Archduke muttered to himself for a moment before tentatively opening the black wooden box. However, the other Grand Duke suddenly had a bad feeling the moment he was about to open the box. He quickly shouted in a low voice, "Wait!" However, it was too late. This Grand Duke who was about to open the box had already unlocked the box and opened it slightly. Nothing out of the ordinary happened. The box had already been opened slightly. Seeing that nothing out of the ordinary happened, the Archduke who opened the box gestured to the other Archdukes that everything was fine. Then the box was completely opened. A blood-red light instantly spread out from the box, illuminating the entire ancient cave in a red glow. This is when all the Archdukes saw clearly what was inside the box. Their expressions couldn't help but change slightly, because what they saw was actually a heart that was still beating. This heart was nailed into the box by a wooden nail. This was Grand Duke Torito's heart. There was no mistaking it. The 12 Grand Dukes looked at the heart that was nailed into the wooden box and didn't speak for a long time. Then, waves of furious auras spread out from the 12 Grand Dukes. Even though this wasn't the heart of Grand Duke Torito, but the heart of a vampire who wasn't even a noble, this way of dealing with it was a great provocation to the Grand Dukes of the ancient families. Thinking about it carefully, this was the territory of the 13 ancient families, and it was also the resting place of Grand Duke Torito, one of the 13 Grand Dukes. But now, without the knowledge of the other Grand Dukes, a Grand Duke's heart was nailed with a wooden nail just like that. If this was done by an enemy, it would be the greatest mockery to the defense system of the 13 ancient clans. At this moment, the anger of the enraged Archdukes was enough to cause the rocks in the ancient cave to shatter from the pressure. At this moment, the sound of light footsteps could be heard from not too far away. It was the passage that led to this ancient cave, a normal passage. The passage that the 12 Grand Dukes entered was just a passage that was violently broken open. When they heard the footsteps, the 12 Grand Dukes looked over. They saw a figure slowly walking into the ancient cave with a candle. The candlelight was enough for the 12 Grand Dukes to see the newcomer. "It's you, Bailey? It's a great honor to see all the Grand Dukes again." The one who appeared in front of the 12 Grand Dukes was the acting Grand Duke of the Torito clan, Bailey. At this moment, Bailgang looked around and saw the opened bronze coffin and the broken scarecrow. He said calmly, "It's been more than a month since the last meeting of the Archdukes. Bailgang, may I know why the Archdukes have suddenly come?" "Bailey, do you know what happened here?" a Grand Duke asked in a deep voice. However, another Grand Duke said coldly, "Why are you here? Even you can't enter the resting place of the Grand Dukes without permission." At this moment, the 12 Grand Dukes all locked their gazes on Bailigan. Facing the gaze of the oldest vampires in the 12 clans, the acting Grand Duke of the Torito clan seemed a little indifferent. "Because I feel that something that shouldn't be opened has been opened. I have no choice but to come in and take a look without permission. In fact, all the Grand Dukes really shouldn't have opened the box in the scarecrow." One of the Archdukes sneered and said, "If we don't open it, no one will know about Archduke Torito's current tragic situation." and no one will know that he has already been murdered. Perhaps the murderer is you, Bulligan? The 12 Grand Dukes not only locked their gazes, but also their intention to attack. Once Bailey showed a trace of hesitation, he would suffer the fiercest attack from the 12 Grand Dukes. The 12 Grand Dukes gathered together. They naturally wouldn't be afraid of a clan's acting Grand Duke. Even if Bailey was a survivor of the war 100 years ago, he hadn't been promoted to the level of a Grand Duke. Bailey shook his head. I think all of you may have misunderstood. What I mean by shouldn't be opened is not what you think, but this box itself shouldn't be opened. Don't talk nonsense with him. After we capture him, we'll drain his blood and then slowly torture him. A Grand Duke who was always so direct sneered. Perhaps we can more or less know what happened in the crack. What happened in the crack? There was a trace of doubt on Bailey's face. He was lost in thought. However, 2 of the 12 Grand Dukes had already made their move. These were the oldest vampires, and each of them possessed great power. Their long years had given them extremely rich combat experience. It was only natural that the 2 Archdukes would succeed in capturing a junior. But something strange happened. The 2 Archdukes who attacked at the same time had just gotten close to Bailey when their bodies instantly aged horribly. Their skin that was full of vitality and their young faces seemed to have been baptized by thousands of years at this moment and instantly entered a state of decay. Their strength fell to an unprecedented low in an instant. Almost at the same time, the other 10 Grand Dukes had similar changes on their bodies. Their hair turned white in an instant. They turned from plump to ugly and shriveled bodies in an instant. Bailey, what did you do to us? There was a frightened tone. The 12 Grand Dukes were shocked and angry at this time. This kind of aging state was simply unbelievable for vampires. Even if they were fasting, it was impossible for them to age like this. They even felt the approach of death. Didn't I say that something that shouldn't be opened was opened? Bailey directly hit the 2 Grand Dukes in front of him. The 2 Grand Dukes, whose bodies aged instantly, couldn't even resist. Their bodies were directly hit and flew out, crashing into the rock wall of the cave. The speed of your aging is much faster than I thought. At this time, Bailey slowly walked to the damaged scarecrow and seemed to be mocking. It seems that in order to prepare for the next sacred blood ceremony, so many Grand Dukes have really put in a lot of effort. They should have drawn out a lot of their own origin blood, right? No, we are very clear about your ability. You don't have the ability to make people age. The Grand Dukes' voices were quite certain, but there was a trace of fear in the certainty. Their stamina and strength, in this short period of time, had once again dropped to a frightening low. Now they were even weaker than a newborn vampire. Did I say that this was caused by my ability? Bailey shook his head and reached out to pick up the box on the ground. It's this. This is the one. What is this? At this time, Bailey chuckled. Pandora. Pandora. Pandora's box? The 12 Grand Dukes, who were already on the verge of death, had extremely horrified expressions on their faces at this moment. As the Grand Dukes of the clan, they belonged to the ruling class in the inhuman domain. Naturally, they were very clear about the essence of the inhuman domain. This place was actually a special space built by the god kingdom of the destroyed Greek god system. In this god kingdom, there were many treasures of the Greek god system. For example, the master of the Magician Association's Scarlet Flame Tower had a legendary golden apple tree. You actually placed such a terrifying thing in the resting place of the Grand Dukes of the clan. It was no longer the time to think about how such a terrifying thing fell into Bailey's hands. But the current terrible situation, they went from fear to disbelief and then to despair. In just a few seconds, they fell from the peak of inhuman to the brink of death without the ability to resist. The difference in between was so great that they couldn't get used to it immediately, even with all the hardships they had experienced over the years. I didn't ask you to open it, right? At this time, Beyligan slowly closed the black wooden box, expressionlessly. I have never forced you. Bailey! An angry Grand Duke didn't care about his terrible state at this time and crazily pounced forward. However, his whole body was now like a rotting corpse. As he struggled to move forward, flesh and blood kept falling from his body. He kept waving his hands. His wrists began to fall, and his arms began to fall. In the end, he who was like a skeleton fell to the ground and turned into a pool of horrifying pus and blood. At this time, it was still possible to distinguish the strength between the Grand Dukes. The stronger the Grand Dukes, the longer they could resist. The Grand Dukes didn't have much time difference between their deaths. Watching the Grand Dukes die one after another in pain and anger, this was a way of dying that they had never thought of before. Why are you find this magic box, why? Bailey didn't answer the question of the Grand Duke, who persisted. He didn't even look at these Grand Dukes who were struggling on the verge of death. Instead, he began to clean up the broken scarecrows. He picked up the scattered straws, sat on the ground, and began to fix the scarecrows back to their original appearance. At the same time, he listened to the Grand Duke's screams and curses before they died, until the last Grand Duke begged for mercy and turned into a pool of pus and blood, and the scarecrows returned to their original appearance. Bailey slowly stood up and silently cleaned up everything in the ancient cave. He even put the scarecrows back into the bronze coffin again. Later, he took a broom, put on an apron, and began to clean up the remains of the Grand Dukes after their deaths. 100 years ago, you have obtained too many things from that place, but you don't seem to be satisfied. The broom swept the remains of the Grand Dukes one by one, and only Bailey's voice slowly sounded. Later, the first Tower Master, Hui Yao, suggested an alliance. You didn't even think too much and quickly decided to destroy that place and take everything from it. You are like the audience in the arena, sending everyone into the trap of this giant beast. You, who didn't experience the horror of that war, have you ever thought about the despair we felt when we faced that horror? Just like now, when the last of the cleaning items were swept away, Beyligan picked up the candlestick again and closed the entrance of the ancient cave. Before leaving, Beyligan stood at the stone door with his back against the stone wall and muttered to himself, I've gotten justice for all of you, although it's not in the way I wanted, and at the same time it's so sudden. Rest in peace, my comrades. After he left, the place returned to silence again. The Grand Duke's heart that was hidden in the magic box was still releasing the Grand Duke's aura. It would make the vampires of the Toredo clan feel at ease. However, at this moment, in the territories of the other 12 clans, there was an unprecedented horror. The vampires of the 12 clans knelt on the ground in pain. The Grand Duke's death would not deprive them of anything, but it would make them feel sad and extremely uncomfortable. Also, if the Grand Duke died, the problem of who would take over. This is that cave, standing in front of a dark cave entrance. Golden Dragon looked at it from the corner of his eyes. To this, Norman did not respond. He just took the lead and walked into the cave. Golden Dragon, who was rejected, thought that if he did not have to maintain his composure in front of the beauty, he should really give this little vampire a dragon flame. The taste of a bat should be pretty good. Thinking of this, Golden Dragon walked in expressionlessly. After entering, he said confidently, Beauty, don't worry and follow behind me. If there's any danger, I'll protect you. It hurts. What's this? Looking down, Golden Dragon could not help but find that there was a small stone spike on the ground. His leg was pierced by the stone spike. He was a golden dragon. What kind of sharp things could not block his dragon scales? Milo-chan, you seem to be in pain? Boss Luo just asked curiously. Oh, it's nothing. Golden Dragon smiled slightly. It's just a small matter, look. As he spoke, the Golden Dragon took a step forward with his foot that wasn't pierced by the stone spikes. Puff! The second spike. It's so F***ing painful. Maintain your composure. Maintain your composure. Maintain your composure. Maintain your composure. Milo-chan, Boss Luo called softly again. Golden Dragon turned around gracefully, covered his mouth, and chuckled. I made you worry. I'm a little happy. Having said that, Golden Dragon learned his lesson this time. He no longer stood on the ground, but quietly floated up a few inches above the ground. This place could not replenish the magic element. To hell with it. Then Fafnana's head accidentally knocked against a particularly long stalagmite that grew down from the top of the cave. God knows why the stalagmite was not broken, but Golden Dragon's forehead had a big bump. Chapter 1356. Teresa followed behind them, silently, fearing that she would lose them if she lost her focus for a moment, so her eyes were constantly locked on the people in front of her. Any one of them would do, as long as there was not an empty darkness in front of her. The sound of footsteps could make her feel a little relieved. Mr. Norman, at that time the clan's team passed through this passage and finally found the humans living in the deep pit. Boss Luo's voice was as clear as the sound of water dripping in the cave. Mr. Vampire replied with a soft yes in front of them. That should be the case. Since Mr. Vampire knew the way out clearly, it was because he had walked through it before. Since he had walked through it before, he should be able to lead them out safely. There was nothing wrong with this logic. After walking for about 10 minutes, they seemed to feel the flow of air. The air was no longer stuffy, but injected with some kind of fresh vitality. At least, Teresa felt that the rotten smell seemed to have been washed away. She could not help but greedily take 2 deep breaths, but still remained silent and vigilant. What's that sound? Golden Dragon stopped at this time, listening to something with some doubts. He still maintained the state of floating a few inches in the same place, and at the same time released an invisible protection around his head to avoid another kowtow. But nothing similar happened in the following journey. It's the sound of the wind, Mr. Vampire said indifferently. At the same time, he was more curious. Vampires had an innate advantage in hearing, but this emotional columnist's hearing seemed to be sharper than that of a vampire. There was wind blowing in the cave, forming different air pressure in the complex terrain, and then forming a sound. There was nothing surprising about it. Perhaps it would become scary, except for Teresa. No one present would be frightened by such a gloomy atmosphere. That strange sound gradually became clearer. Golden Dragon shook his head at this time. It's not like the sound of the wind. Several parts are connected together. It doesn't sound like a natural sound, but like the sound of some kind of musical instrument. Why is there a musical instrument here? Teresa asked subconsciously. She was too nervous. Let's go and see. Fafnana said indifferently as it floated towards the source of the sound. It was feeling depressed and was looking for something to vent it out. After waking up from its coma, the Golden Dragon's powerful recovery ability made it no longer as weak as when it was fighting those vines. Instead, because of that strange medicine, it had squeezed out all its energy, causing it to be even stronger than before when it recovered its energy. It felt like it could fight 10 people at once. But it had to be elegant and beautiful. Seeing that the Golden Dragon had already acted on her own, Mr. Vampire frowned, but he saw Boss Luo naturally followed her, followed by Miss Maid. After hesitating for a moment, Teresa felt that the man and woman who came to visit her sister Maria in the morning were more familiar with her. She could only brace herself and quickly follow them. After some consideration, Mr. Vampire felt that it would be safer to not let these mysterious people out of his sight, so he could only bring the young girl Mina with him. The interior of the cave could not be said to be connected in all directions, but there were quite a few forks. However, with the guidance of the sound, the Golden Dragon quickly found the source of the sound. It was coming from a cave in a cave passage. It was very clear that strange sound was indeed like the sound of some kind of musical instrument. But it was obviously not a human's instrument because the sound was messy. The Golden Dragon directly released a fireball in its palm, illuminating the surroundings and looking at the entrance of the cave. After walking forward for about a few meters, it found that there was something blocking the entrance. It was made of animal skin and bones, something like a curtain. It seems that someone used to live here. Fafnana turned back and said, then opened the curtain and walked in. Everyone followed her one by one. The space behind the curtain was not big, about 10 square meters. There was a stone plate placed in the middle of the room. It looked like a table, and there were some dried algae on the ground, as well as some simple tools. The source of the sound was quickly found. It was from a bone flute placed on the stone plate. After the outside air flowed in, it formed a messy sound that everyone could hear through the air holes. Ah! Teresa let out a low cry of surprise. At the end of the line of sight, she saw 2 skeletons placed in the corner of the cave, sitting on the dried algae. They are human bones. Teresa was so nervous that she directly grasped her collar. It seems that they are the 2 guys who were exiled in Goldie's diary. The golden dragon glanced at them and seemed to lose interest in this exploration. Well, it was not happy that it could not find a target to vent its anger, but it looked at the vampire, who was also looking at this cave, not far away, with some doubts. This place was not far from the exit route, or rather, it was just next to it. Why did this vampire seem to know this place for the first time? Logically speaking, the guy from the Torito clan should have entered from this route with his troops. It was impossible that he didn't check the surrounding terrain and didn't find this place, right? After all, it was not a particularly secret place. Or rather, no secret measures were taken at all. However, Mr. Vampire did not speak, and Huang Jinlong was too lazy to speak. Then he began to focus his attention on Luo Marin, thinking if he should think of a way to send Luo Marin's troublesome, ugly girlfriend away after returning to the ground. What no one knew was that at least the non-humans in the inhuman domain didn't know was that this popular writer of the emotional column had almost 0 combat experience. In short, she was just a theorist who had no actual combat experience. Since there is no discovery, let's go, Busby suddenly said in silence. There seems to be a diary here. Boss Luo walked to the 2 skeletons. He stretched out his hand, and Miss made spread a handkerchief on his palm. Luaccio tried to be as gentle as possible to avoid destroying the integrity of the skeletons. After moving one of the skeleton's hand bones away, he picked up a roll of animal skin handkerchief under the hand bones. Boss Luo looked a little happy. This diary seems to be complete. I think we can know the story of these 2 after they left the deep pit. Oh, is this the sequel of that little diary? The golden dragon narrowed its eyes at this moment, and it was a complete little porn book. Do you want to read it? Boss Luo looked at the people in front of him and asked. Yes. The golden dragon, who almost roared at this moment, looked very charming. Its eyes were shining, like a husky who squatted in front of its master and bit its tail. Don't waste time. Unexpectedly, Mr. Vampire said coldly at this time, we don't know if Lost Fong will be active again. Since we have found the thing, if you want to read it, wait until we return to the ground. Mr. Norman is right, Boss Luo smiled. I didn't think it through. Then, let's go back to the ground first. After saying that, he wrapped the animal skin diary with a handkerchief and handed it to Miss Maid. Seeing this, the vampire directly walked out of the cave. Boss Luo was the first to follow this time. He was right behind Mr. Vampire. Mr. Norman, you don't seem to be very interested in the sequel of this story. The vampire didn't even turn his head. Haven't we seen the sequel? They left the deep pit and lived here, but in the end they still welcomed death. Similar stories have happened a lot in the modern world. No matter how touching it is, haven't you heard of it before? I'm more inclined to think that perception has stages. Luaccio said casually, if you haven't eaten the same food for a long time, you will suddenly want to eat it. But if you eat the same kind of food every day, you'll get sick of it. But this kind of food actually tastes the same. Perhaps. I don't know when I'll suddenly remember that Mr. Norman will also have a moment where he wants to know what happened. He suddenly stopped and turned around to look at Luo, Chio up and down seriously. Then he nodded. You're more like a member of the Torito clan than any other vampire of the Torito clan. Boss Luo blinked and asked curiously, "Is that so?" Mr. Vampire said indifferently, "Usually, only those who are bored to a certain extent will pursue this kind of illusory thing. Those who want to survive will never stop." Boss Luo said thoughtfully, "Don't you know the meaning of suffering in the human world?" "You can think whatever you want," the vampire said indifferently. Then, as if he was emphasizing something or something else, he turned around and continued to walk forward. He whispered, "Besides, the sequel of this story is really not interesting. They just couldn't stand the loneliness, so they gave birth to another child and finally died in the hands of this child." Boss Luo opened his mouth, then shook his head and said half-jokingly, "It's probably not civilized to give a spoiler in advance. It's better to leave some suspense for the later generations." This time, Mr. Vampire didn't reply. He walked further and further away, and his pace seemed to be faster. Miss Maid came to the master's side, seeing Luaccio looking at the receding figure with a questioning look. Luaccio smiled and said, "Seems like he was taught a lesson." "Are you unhappy?" Miss Maid asked softly. Boss Luo shook his head and said softly, "You have to accept it humbly. By the way, go back quietly and bury the two in the cave. Since they chose to die in the same cave, let them not be disturbed in the future. Take it as the reward for this diary." "Okay." Miss Servant Girl nodded. Boss Luo then glanced at the disappointed Miluo-chan and Maria, who had become her younger sister, and suddenly said with interest, "Do you have a feeling of not knowing each other when you meet?" Fate was like this. It liked to play tricks on people inside. The rest of the way was silent, and there was no other discovery. After walking out of the cave, there was a small path that went up the slope. The rotten air in the crack had disappeared. The night sky of the inhuman domain presented itself in front of Boss Luo, who came here for the first time. Just like the sun in the day, there was no moon at night. As for the stars, they were more like gems used to decorate. Lights could be seen not far away. That was the farm under the Torito clan. Seeing the place where they lived, the young girl Mina showed a relaxed look on her face, while Mr. Vampire frowned, because he found that the farm was noisier than usual, and there seemed to be more vampires nearby. "Who is it?" It was at this moment that a patrol squad of clan guards arrived. Looking at the fully armed six-man squad, Busby could not help but furrow his brows a little deeper. And this small group of patrol guards recognized Busby immediately and became respectful. "It's Buzz," but their words were directly interrupted by Busby, who said in a deep voice, "I just came out of the crack. What happened here? Why are there so many clan members near the farm?" "It's like this." The team leader quickly described what happened. When he said that the golden dragon went berserk and destroyed the clan's castle, Fafner, Mina, at the back looked at the stars in the night sky. The night sky is so beautiful tonight. Now, the nobles have temporarily moved to the farm, the team leader said seriously. Most of the clan members are starting to rebuild the castle, and it will take a few days. Busby nodded, then waved his hand and said, "I know, you guys continue to patrol. I'll bring people over to the farm. By the way, where is Bailey Hill? The acting Grand Duke is directing the rebuilding of the castle. Do we need to inform him?" The team leader quickly asked. "No need, you guys go." "Yes." The patrol squad left right away and didn't ask about the people around Bazabi. After the patrol squad left, Bazabi glanced at the people he had encountered in the rift again. He seemed to be thinking about something. After a while, he opened his mouth and said, "It's been a hard day. You guys did well this time. I'll propose to the acting Grand Duke to commend you after this. Now follow me into the farm to rest." Boss Luo, Miss Maid, and Teresa were still wearing the escort team's uniform. This Mr. Vampire didn't seem to have the intention to expose them. "Then we'll do as you say." Boss Luo nodded. "In human territory, chaotic neutral area 7. on a lonely mountain ridge, there was a medium-sized, gray-black ancient castle. At this time, in front of the ancient castle, a thin man wearing a casual white suit welcomed him. In the courtyard in front of the castle, ghosts were busy cleaning the courtyard. When the man in the white suit arrived, the ghosts here all shivered. As if he didn't see them, the man walked straight to the door of the castle, stretched out his hands, and opened the door directly. "Roll and dash." The man's voice shook the interior of the castle almost at the moment when the door was opened. At this moment, a figure slowly walked down the stairs from the shadows. Chapter 1357. That person still hadn't walked out from the shadows of the stairs, and the man in the white suit frowned for some reason. At the same time, "Old man, I told you that I would find you." Not far away, Miss Spirit, which landed in front of the castle's gate after a few leaps. On her high heels, a pair of small green wing-shaped air masses disappeared the moment she landed. "Do you think you can escape?" After landing, the spirit which rushed to the man in the white suit. "Farrell." She grabbed his collar with both hands and said angrily, "Ungrateful bastard!" Farrell's eyes suddenly turned cold. Miss Witch, whose anger was immediately extinguished, felt her heart skip a beat. She gave up on grabbing Farrell's collar and looked around, the castle in front of her. "This place. I think I've seen it in a magazine before." Miss Spirit, which was not trying to change the topic. She really felt like she had seen this place before. After entering the inhuman domain through the coordinates, she had been chasing Farrell all the way. She did not have time to determine her specific location. She only knew that she was in a chaotic area. Wait, this place seems to be... Miss Spirit Witch's doubts were soon solved. She found the information that matched this place from her memory, especially when she saw the huge oil painting in front of the castle hall. She could not help but swallow her saliva and subconsciously looked at Farrell beside her. Farrell looked at the figure on the stairs and said calmly, "As you thought, this is Duke Roland's castle." Duke Roland. Miss Spirit, which gasped. The last sword saint of France. Miss Spirit, which suddenly looked at the figure hiding in the shadows of the stairs. Her expression changed slightly. The information about this Duke Roland flashed through her mind. The last sword saint of France, the legendary hero of the Great War 100 years ago, the owner of the holy sword Joyeuse and the Black Dragon Knight. According to legend, he was the descendant of the royal family of the Carolingian dynasty, the honorary president of the Inhuman Domain Swordsmanship Association. The last sword saint, Duke Roland, was much more famous in the Inhuman Domain than the most evil knight in history, Farrell. He was a legendary hero that Miss Spirit, which had heard about since she was a child. At this moment, even someone as bold as the witch who had freed Farrell from the knight's prison couldn't help but feel nervous. "You're not Roland. Who are you?" But at this moment, Farlier's brows were furrowed, or rather, his gaze was a bit more serious. Finally, the figure on the stairs came down again and slowly emerged from the shadows. Are you here to find my grandfather?" Her voice was a little timid. She was hugging a pillow that was the same height as her. She didn't seem to be good at communicating. In fact, he did look like the type who was not good at communicating with others. Miss, which could not help but open her mouth slightly. Miss Spirit Witch's eyes, Miss Spirit Witch, Miss Spirit Witch, Spirit Witch. Furthermore, it was a woman. What a cruel thing to do. The witch quickly restrained her sympathy, because this woman claimed to be the granddaughter of Duke Roland. Naturally, she was also a princess that she could not afford to offend. "Are you Roland's granddaughter?" Farrell looked at the girl with a strange gaze. His gaze made the girl, who had an unusually large body, lower her head. "Where's Roland?" Farrell suddenly asked. Hearing this, the granddaughter of the sword saint revealed a trace of sadness. "My grandfather passed away a year ago. Do you have any business with him?" Wait, Duke Roland is dead? Miss Witch was stunned and asked in disbelief, "What is this? Why have I never heard of such a big thing?" Farrell remained silent. No one knew what he was thinking. The Sword Saint's granddaughter timidly said, "Because it wasn't publicized, the funeral was only conducted by the Radiance Tower Master and Lord Kaloya. Where is his grave?" At this moment, Farlier took a deep breath. "Take me to take a look. I once fought alongside him. You are." The granddaughter of the Sword Saint opened her mouth in surprise. "We can barely be considered as former comrades." The granddaughter of the Sword Saint could not help but reveal a puzzled expression. However, she seemed to be the type to easily believe others, or perhaps she had other thoughts in her mind. So she said, "Sir, if you want to pay your respects, it may be a little troublesome." Farrell could not help but look puzzled. "You, come with me first." The girl with an unusually large body sighed and said, "Duke Roland's grave was in a courtyard behind the ancient castle, because the ghost had been taking care of it for a long time. The roses here were not only blooming brilliantly, but also quite neat. Just like this, the courtyard seemed to be a quiet place, but this was under the premise of ignoring a huge statue in the middle of the courtyard. A dragon." Miss Witch looked up at the huge figure that was nearly 20 meters tall and could not help but exclaim. Although it was just a statue, it constantly emitted a terrifying aura. At this moment, Farrell also looked up at it. The granddaughter of the Sword Saint looked at the two of them and said carefully, "This is my grandfather's most cherished companion. After my grandfather was buried here, it automatically turned into a statue and guarded this place. Any stranger who wants to come close will be attacked by it. No wonder you led us to this place so easily." Miss Witch looked at the granddaughter of the Sword Saint and said indifferently. The granddaughter of the Sword Saint did not reply at this moment, and no one knew what she was thinking. At this moment, Farrell walked directly toward the grave. However, the moment he stepped into the courtyard, the ground of the courtyard shook slightly. The eyes of the huge ancient dragon statue suddenly opened, and a pair of lifelike huge eyeballs looked down at him. Giant dragons. In the inhuman realm, they were only legends and were usually very difficult to meet. Even the golden dragon, who was watched by the Magician Association and became famous because of its constant search for partners, was protected by the biology department of the Magician Association. It was difficult for ordinary people to see it. The moment the eyes of the statue opened, countless cracks appeared on the body of the statue. Then the statue shattered and a strong wind spread out, accompanied by a roar toward the sky. What appeared in front of everyone was a huge black dragon with claws and fangs. Its wings were spread out, and it was very powerful. Its scales were shining with black light. "Old man, be careful." Miss Witch blurted out. Under the gaze of this huge black dragon, Farrell walked directly to Duke Roland's grave. The moment he stood before the grave, the huge black dragon suddenly lowered its head, opened its huge bloody mouth, and roared at Farrell again. The evilest knight in history suddenly punched the black dragon's forehead. This punch was so loud that it could shake the surroundings. It was even louder than the roar of the huge dragon. The ground outside the courtyard suddenly cracked, but the courtyard was not damaged at all. After taking the punch, the black dragon directly fell to the ground and saw stars. "Ajuin, I'm just here to see Roland, not to fight." Farrell stared at the black dragon's eyes expressionlessly. "But if you don't wake up, I don't mind beating you up so that you can remember who I am." "You've already beaten me up." "Don't tell me until you've beaten me up." Miss Witch cursed in her heart. When she turned to look at the granddaughter of the Sword Saint, she found that the granddaughter's mouth was wide open as if she had seen a ghost. The granddaughter of the Sword Saint stiffly turned around and looked at Miss Witch. "Who is he?" Miss Witch cleared her throat and then said seriously, "Mordred, the knight in the Great War 100 years ago. Do you know him? Mordred, him? The granddaughter of the sword saint opened her eyes wide. He's the lunatic that Grandpa mentioned. Sure. Miss, which suddenly strode forward and hurriedly covered the chubby girl's mouth with her hand. Then she carefully stared at Farrell in front of the grave and felt relieved when she saw that he didn't respond. At this time, the black dragon lying on the ground with its tongue out. Audwyn's body emitted a faint light. Then its body shrunk little by little and finally turned into a black-haired young man. There was a cross-shaped wound on its cheek, right on the bridge of its nose. At this time, the young man rubbed his head and showed a pained expression, as if he had seen a ghost. Do you remember now? Farrell casually glanced at the black dragon in human form. Black Dragon Audwyn in front of him stood up with a vigilant expression. You lunatic! You're not dead yet? Weren't you captured and locked up? Farrell didn't explain this matter and directly asked, How did Roland die? His lifespan was up, so he naturally died. The black dragon shook its head. Aren't humans that fragile? With Roland's bodily functions, it's not impossible for him to die of old age, but it would take at least 100 or 200 years. Farrell coldly snorted. I'm not dead, so he naturally won't die either. He died of illness. Black Dragon Audwyn impatiently stated another reason. Farrell raised his eyebrows and a violent and crazy aura suddenly swept through the entire courtyard. The black dragon youth in front of him couldn't help but slightly change his expression, but it seemed that he didn't intend to say yes. He just gritted his teeth and showed a fearless attitude. God knew why his legs were slightly trembling at this moment. However, Farrell did not make a move. He maintained his terrifying aura and remained motionless. All of a sudden, Farrell's figure flashed, but he did not attack the black dragon. Instead, he attacked the granddaughter of the sword saint who was standing beside the witch. He also punched out. This punch could directly beat the black dragon to the ground, but now it was aimed at a delicate, a girl. It was easy to imagine the result. Old man, you're crazy again. At this moment, the granddaughter of the sword saint looked at the approaching fist and seemed to be completely stunned. She was so scared that she didn't move. The fist finally stopped in front of the granddaughter of the sword saint. It was about 2 inches away. Farrell didn't retract his arm, but just stared at her and asked in a low voice, Have you finished learning Roland's sword saint technique? The granddaughter of the sword saint seemed to have just reacted. Ah, what did you say? Oh, sorry, I didn't mean it. I'm sorry. He saw a long sword pointing straight from bottom to top. The tip of the sword was pointing at Farrell's throat. It was about 1 inch away. The granddaughter of the sword saint seemed to be unaware of this. She panicked and directly dropped the long sword in her hand. However, she still tightly held the pillow in her hand and kept apologizing. Ha 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 ha. Black Dragon Audwyn suddenly held his stomach and laughed loudly. He pointed at Farrell and mocked. Are you defeated? Old lunatic. Even when Law was still alive, he was defeated by Leia's swordsmanship. You deserve it. Farrell didn't look angry at all. He directly grabbed the granddaughter of the sword saint, Leia's wrist, and said seriously, Very good. You're much better than those useless fellows from the night mechanical engineers. You barely qualify. I want you. Come with me. Ah, where are we going? The granddaughter of the sword saint suddenly panicked. Give me some time to prepare. So fast. What's going on? Miss, which obviously didn't know how to react. At this time, Farrell directly grabbed Leia's wrist. After a flash, he appeared beside the black dragon and directly pinched the back of the dragon's neck with his palm. After a painful howl, the black dragon's body suddenly enlarged and directly returned to the body of a black dragon. Farrell, who was standing directly on the black dragon's neck, still had his palm pressed against the back of the black dragon's neck. Go. To the Magician Association. I want to see Hui Yao. Old lunatic. What right do you have to ride on me? The black dragon was unwilling to agree and twisted his body wildly in the air. Disobedient? Then I'll make the black dragon race extinct. It stopped. The black dragon's twisting stopped at once. It said fiercely, "Listen, I just don't want you to be in Leia's hands. This is a strategic compromise. Don't be too proud." It roared unwillingly, spread its wings, and was about to fly away from this ancient castle. "Old man, you want to run away again?" Miss Witch saw this and stomped her feet. The emerald green wings on her high heels spread out again, and then she quickly jumped onto the black dragon's back. She smiled sweetly and said, "Sorry to disturb you." Another one. The Toridu clan. In front of the cliff, the master of the Radiance Tower and Kelowna Shinryu, as well as the little butterfly holding a golden apple, were overlooking the ruins of the castle surrounded by the cliff in the distance. The vampires were busy moving the rubble that could no longer be used like bees. From the looks of it, Fafnir must have caused a ruckus here. The master of the Radiance Tower sighed softly and naturally looked at Kelowna's Shinryu. "Well, this guy is quite energetic." Kelowna's Shinryu nodded. "The effect of this medicine is really good. I'll get some more for you later. It's a gift in return." Hearing this, the little butterfly holding the apple couldn't help blushing. Get some more? Is he going to do that kind of comfortable thing again? Chapter 1358. After avoiding the topic of the Golden Dragon destroying the castle of the Toridu clan, the Shinryu of Kelowna lit a cigarette to calm herself down. Then she suddenly asked, "Aren't you going to take care of that little guy called Secret Steel?" Calling him a little guy was fine. After all, the Shinryu of Kelowna was much younger than her. Regarding this, the first Tower Master, Hui Yao, did not have any objection. However, he shook his head and said, "The relationship between the Tower Masters is not that of a superior and a subordinate. Strictly speaking, we are all companions who pursue the pinnacle of magic. Since Secret Steel came here without notifying us, he probably has his own reasons. I know him better than anyone else. If there's a need, he won't hide it from us." "Is that so?" Long Shirua nodded. She blew on the cigarette and said casually, "You are so trusting." The Tower Master of the Radiance Tower smiled and said, "Probably I'm the kind of person who trusts others easily. Besides, humans are always suspicious." "Little brat." Long Shirua looked at her with disdain, but she thought that she was similar to her in some matters. So she put out the cigarette and said, "What are you going to do now? Fafnir seems to have disappeared around here. You don't want to see Secret Steel either. You can't just stay here. Let me tell you, my time is very precious. Every minute is worth hundreds of thousands of secret crystals. Teacher, if you need it, I still have some in my private vault this year," the Tower Master of the Radiance Tower said softly. "All right, I'll stay here." The Tower Master of the Radiance Tower looked at the busy vampires in front of her. Then she looked at the bottomless abyss below and frowned. It's strange. Not long ago, that thing's reaction seemed to have suddenly disappeared. That thing. Long Shirua imitated Hui Yao's action and looked at the crack of the abyss below. Speaking of which, the inhuman territory wasn't something that the Shinryu Kelowna was afraid of. After all, she had lost the support of Kelowna in this place, and there was no such thing as unlimited stamina. One of the things he was afraid of was the Tower Master of the Radiance Tower, who had an ill-fated master-disciple relationship with him many years ago. This guy knew his weakness all too well. The other thing was that there was something beneath the 13 clans. Whenever the Shinryu explored the inhuman domain, he could vaguely sense that there was something terrifying beneath the lost rift. The size of that thing should be beyond the limits of this world. In Eastern vernacular, there were obviously immortals who could have ascended thousands of years ago, but they refused to leave and so on. It wasn't that she hadn't thought of going over to investigate a few times, but due to various reasons she hadn't done so. Should she take advantage of this opportunity? Long Shirua secretly glanced at Hui Yao and finally gave up on the idea. Who knew what kind of strange things would happen if she went down to explore this time? The Shinryu Kelowna always felt that he had something against the inhuman territory. Indeed, teachers should know that I have the ability to gather information about the inhuman territory. The Tower Master of the Radiance Tower nodded firmly. All these years, the 13 clans have been using the sacred blood ritual to awaken the thing hidden in the abyss. In recent years, I've begun to feel that the consciousness of the thing below is getting stronger and stronger. But now it's strange. Isn't that a good thing? Long Shirua shrugged and said, "There are fewer troublesome things and we're free now. We don't have to worry about how it disappeared." The Tower Master of the Radiance Tower smiled bitterly and said, "The management here is slightly different from teachers. I can't be like Teacher in the East, where all the Inhumans are in awe of him. Should I say that there are too many beliefs here, or because there are too many beliefs, it has become a land of no beliefs?" With that, Hui Yao gently tapped the super long magic wand in his hand on the ground, and then he opened a rectangular spell on the ground. He closed his eyes. After a while, he opened his eyes and said, "Finally, I've found the specific location of Fafnir." "Oh, have you found it?" Long Shirua suddenly became spirited. "Where is it?" The Tower Master of the Radiance Tower looked a little surprised and said, "It seems to be near Torito's farm." "Farm?" The little butterfly monster blinked and asked curiously, "Sister Long, do vampires also need to farm?" Long Shirua sneered and said, "The concept of a vampire's farm is different from the one you know. You'll be surprised later." The Tower Master of the Radiance Tower once again tapped the ground with his magic wand and interrupted. "Let's move over. If Fafnir destroys the clan's farm, it will be more serious than destroying the place where they live." Long Shirua said disdainfully, "Only you can allow such a farm to exist." Hui Yao could only smile bitterly and said, "We can't let the 13 clans set their sights on the modern world. A hungry vampire can do anything. Now, most of them can be placed in the inhuman territory. This price is already reasonable." Kelowna's Shinryu did not express his opinion again. Then he said indifferently, "You have to think about it carefully. This kind of peace may not last long. The development brought by peace will soon reach the limit of what this place can bear. Once this territory is broken, you may not be so lucky as to be able to find another destroyed kingdom of God to build a new, inhuman territory." Hui Yao's expression changed. "Teacher knows." Long Shirua said indifferently, "I can feel it. The space structure here is a little unstable." "Indeed." Hui Yao sighed and said, "There are more and more changes recently. It should be soon." As he spoke, the teleportation spell was fully activated. A stream of light flashed, and they disappeared from the cliff. After that, their conversation was cut off. After the group of people entered the farm, Luocho and the others were settled in a small villa at the edge of the farm town by Mr. Vampire. After that, Mr. Vampire left with the crop girl Mina. He said that he would send her back to the place where she used to live and ask them to rest and wait in the villa. Suddenly, only Boss Luo and his servant, the Golden Dragon, who changed his name to Milo-chan, and Teresa, who was currently a human, were left in the villa. There was not even a single vampire patrolling around the villa. However, there were many ingredients that were suitable for human consumption in the villa. Moreover, they were all fresh. When Boss Luo was at the bottom of the crack, he said that he wanted to eat Miss Maid's dinner. Therefore, after Mr. Vampire left, Miss Maid directly walked into the kitchen with the ingredients and soon came out with exquisite delicacies. As for Huang Jinlong, he took advantage of this period of time and discovered a huge bathhouse in the villa. He was already planning how to take a bath with the beauty. When he thought of the exciting plot, Huang Jinlong immediately had 2 lines of nosebleeds. As for the problem of suppressing the gun, it did not exist. Delicious. It's really great. Although the appearance of the food on the table was enough to give a high score, when it entered her mouth, the moment it exploded in her mouth, Teresa could not help but exclaim in surprise. Speaking of which, Miss Teresa, has Miss Maria woken up yet? Boss Luo put down his hands in front of the table and asked. Teresa shook her head. I have a feeling that sister is sleeping very soundly this time. I have never experienced such a situation before. However, I can feel that she is very safe. It was probably because of the heavy mental burden of expelling the vengeful spirit that invaded her body, although some of it was due to Miss Maid's whispered reminder that forced her own potential. However, there was no hurry to wake Maria up. Although the original intention of this trip was to find Huang Jinlong and solve the problem of Huang Jinlong's fertility problem, they should not stay here. But Huang Jinlong was here. He always felt that something interesting would happen. Therefore, Boss Luo did not intend to point it out. After a simple dinner, Huang Jinlong rushed out of the dining room directly. No one knew what he was doing. Not long after, Huang Jinlong, who was wrapped in a bath towel, gently pushed open the door of the living room. Well, I found a nice bathhouse. Where is the beauty? In the living room, only Teresa was left. She sat on the sofa and read the Inhuman newspaper with great interest. Although she had never walked in the inhuman domain with her own consciousness, her sister Maria had shown her some of this kind of newspaper in the modern world. Every time he looked at this kind of magical moving newspaper, he had a strange feeling about Teresa's arrival. They went out. Teresa raised her head at this time. They said that they are going for a walk after dinner. As for the bath, I also want to take a bath. Oh, go ahead. Huang Jinlong shook his head, turned around, closed the door, and left. Then Teresa heard a vulgar word coming from outside the living room. Then the whole villa shook violently. Teresa rushed out of the living room in a panic. She saw that the corridor outside had cracked and then the walls had turned black. In addition, there was a big hole in the ceiling. This Milo-chan seemed to have disappeared. A stream of light flashed. The master of the Radiance Tower, Shinryu, and the little butterfly monster landed at the edge of the farm town. In the woods outside the town, a little fluorescent light was floating in the forest. It looked like a beautiful night. However, Kelowna and Shinryu did not feel anything. Instead, he spoiled the atmosphere and said, "Oh, I can feel the abnormal smell of Fafner soon. It is indeed nearby, and it is very close." The master of the Radiance Tower looked at the night sky. Vaguely, he seemed to hear something. He listened carefully. "Beauty! Beauty! Beauty, where are you? Beauty!" In the sky, a figure wrapped in a bath towel flew and approached from afar. After Kelowna and Shinryu heard this, they suddenly felt a chill. Why do I have an impulse to beat this guy? Teacher, can you control yourself? The master of the Radiance Tower immediately persuaded. Beauty! 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 Kelowna and Shinryu suddenly clenched his fist. No, I can't control this fist. Just don't kill me, right? After that, Kelowna and Shinryu directly rushed to the sky. Teacher, the master of the Radiance Tower couldn't help but sigh. Then he looked at the little butterfly monster and asked helplessly, "Is teacher's temper like this recently?" The little butterfly monster thought with her finger in her mouth. Well, it seems that after coming back from Mount Tai, I don't know why he became angry easily. Mount Tai? The master of the Radiance Tower was startled. Then he said, "Is it the thick fog incident that happened in China not long ago?" Yes. The little butterfly monster nodded. The master of the Radiance Tower pondered for a while. Then he felt that the flow of magic essence had begun to become denser, so he directly said, "Can I ask you for a favor?" Of course. The little butterfly monster quickly nodded. The master of the Radiance Tower said, "Teacher's movements are a bit loud. I want to set up a static enchantment here and try not to alarm the clan vampires in the farm. If possible, Please let teacher be a bit quieter. Okay. The little butterfly monster directly opened her colorful butterfly wings and flew out of the forest. Seeing this, the tower master of the Radiance Tower heaved a sigh of relief and began to focus on preparing the spell he had mentioned. A spell to isolate sound was silently activated in the small town of the farm. Even the high-ranking nobles of the clan who were temporarily staying in the farm did not notice it. Then, just as the master of the Radiance Tower was about to set up the capture spell, little bits of fluorescent light floated past him and seemed to be heading in a certain direction. The master of the Radiance Tower looked at the direction where the fluorescent light gathered in confusion and couldn't help but frown. Not far from the villa, there was a small forest filled with fluorescent light. Even at night, one could see flowers everywhere in the forest. Many of them could be considered as treasures in the modern world. I'll wait for you here. Then I'll come back after I'm done. The servant girl nodded. The place she wanted to go was naturally the cave passage on the way out of the crack where Norman and Beaky's lived. According to Boss Luo's intention, she should tidy up that place so that no one would disturb them. When he could do it manually and had ample time, Boss Luo would naturally choose to do it by himself. After the servant girl left, Boss Luo directly sat down under a small tree in the forest. He opened the second animal skin handbook. At this time, the fluorescent light in the forest began to gather here. They gathered into a whirlpool above the small sea of flowers and scattered over every inch of the place, making the brightness of the place suitable for reading. Perhaps we were all wrong. Children are not scary at all. What we are afraid of is just the fear of recalling the days when we were crops. The second child of Beaky's, and I actually didn't need much, just a little blood every day. What a cute child, because of the arrival of the second child. Even if we live in a place far away from our companions, we don't seem to feel lonely. I like it when the child calls me daddy, and I like it when the child calls Beaky's mommy. Once again, I feel the heartbeat that I felt when I first came to this place. Every day is a blissful day. I don't know why Beaky's body suddenly became weak. It became worse. What should I do? What should I do? I have no choice. Maybe there's not enough food. I can't let the child and Beaky starve. So today I secretly went back to the place where my companions lived. I didn't get any food from my former companions. They seemed to have changed. I could only take some risks and go further away to find some fresh algae. There's no other way. The nearby places where I could collect algae were guarded by them. Fortunately, I accidentally found a place full of algae, and it was very close to home. What a lucky discovery. Today, I finished collecting earlier than usual. I was full of expectations and went back home early, but I finally knew that Beaky's body was getting weaker day by day. She's secretly feeding the child more food behind my back. What did I do? What did I do? I picked up a weapon and hit the child directly. It was still in Beaky's arms, but at the same time it was biting Beaky's wrist. What did I do? I'm sorry, my child. Beaky's hugged me tightly and cried. She told me that she did everything willingly. She asked me to let the child go. It was all she had. I loved her deeply. I couldn't refuse her request. This animal skin handbook was much more delicate than the first one. There were several pages stacked together. Boss Luo stacked the page that he had finished reading and was ready to continue reading. But at this moment, there was a slight sound of footsteps beside him. It wasn't Miss Maid who came back. If Yi came back, Luo Chio would feel it. Boss Luo looked up and saw a blond young man wearing a white robe with a long wand in his hand. The fluorescent light was like the gathering of stars and turned into a river of stars. It rose little by little in the sea of flowers, illuminating the bright flowers and the quiet woman sitting under the tree. When Hui Yao saw the woman sitting in the middle of the flowers and fireflies, he couldn't help but slow down his footsteps. It was as if he had passed through layers of fog and finally found the beautiful scenery under the magnificent starry sky. He stopped walking. The moment they looked at each other, he had a feeling that he had never felt before in the past 160 years. His heart slightly beat. For more than 100 years, he had been immersed in the vast sea of magic. When he came back to his senses, he had unknowingly reached the peak of the inhuman realm. He had never felt this way before. Even the 103,000 magic books hidden in the Tower of Secretaries couldn't give him a throbbing of his soul. A smile. It was just a simple and friendly smile, but it touched his soul directly. Her smile made Hui Yao feel that this would be a moment that he would remember for the rest of his life. Tonight was a beautiful night. Chapter 1359. The golden dragon, who was wrapped in a towel, suddenly felt that something was blocking its way. It should have been furious, but when it saw who was blocking its way, it instantly changed its expression into one of seeing a ghost. Almost without any hesitation, without any words, the golden dragon instantly turned around and ran away. It was really afraid that this true dragon of the East would feed it that strange pill again. It felt like there was nowhere to vent its energy. It felt like something rushed to the top of its head and then flowed back through its tiny blood vessels to the rest of its body. It felt like it was being roasted by fire. It also felt like its drain was blocked when it was holding its bladder. Where do you think you're going? Long Shirua raised its fist and narrowed its eyes. The only thing that came to his mind was that Hui Yao, this brat, knew him very well. After sensing that something similar to a barrier had been cast around him, the true dragon of China decided to loosen up his muscles and bones. When it was in Kelowna, it had too many worries and accumulated too much pressure. Every time the Kelowna Shinryu visited the inhuman domain in the west, it would feel like it was a vacation. Then it would let itself go. Old woman. As a lady, using force will make you unable to get love. You must be elegant. Ah, really? I've been single for thousands of years. Why would I care about these few decades? You're such a violent person. Which male would dare to ride you? The one who can ride me has not been born yet. You don't have to worry about it. Come, I've accumulated a lot of pressure recently. I don't feel good all over. Let me hit you a few times. Am I a sandbag to relieve pressure? You violent Shinryu can't get married for the rest of your life. I'll curse you. I'll curse you to become old and wrinkled. I'll curse you to die alone and become an old woman. I'll hit you until you can't be saved by the ultimate transformation spell. Looking at the Kelowna Shinryu in front of it, it was like an old single woman who had to work overtime during her period. The golden dragon's heart couldn't help but thump. She was obviously serious. Damned old hag, you think I'm afraid of you? The golden dragon instantly gave up on its elegance and bearing. It let out a roar and revealed its true form. The golden dragon clashed with its golden horns towards Kelowna and Shinryu. That's more like it. Don't make me stop too quickly. Long Shirua laughed maniacally. He opened his arms and grabbed the dragon's horn. Then he exerted force in his arms and threw the golden dragon to the ground. Rumble. Immediately, sand and pebbles flew everywhere. When the golden dragon hit the ground, a large amount of pebbles soared into the sky. Seeing this scene, the little butterfly demon, who had come with the request of the Radiance Tower Master, immediately felt bad. How could she persuade him? There was no way to stop it. Old hag, don't hit my face. Ah, again. Ah. Enough. Ah. The Radiance Tower Master didn't wake up from his daze until the ground shook and he heard Fafnir's roar from afar. He subconsciously furrowed his brows, but at this moment he saw a huge rock falling down from the sky. Seeing that the quiet woman under the tree was about to be injured by the boulder, the Tower Master of the Radiance Tower waved the magic wand in his hand without any hesitation. A ray of light instantly struck the boulder, turning it into ashes before it could even touch the ground. Miss, are you okay? The Radiance Tower Master leaped forward lightly and appeared under the tree. This kind of movement was too big. Even if it was shielded from external perception, It could be easily sensed with ordinary senses and even heard. Boss Luo resisted the urge to peek at what was happening in front of him. The game between him and Miss Maid was still there, so naturally he wouldn't break the game rules first. "I'm fine. Thank you." Boss Luo smiled slightly and then stood up. "But you may have misunderstood. I'm a man because of a special reason." The Radiance Tower Master's first reaction was to open his mouth slightly. Then he felt as if something in the depths of his soul had suddenly broken. The feeling of being moved instantly turned into a feeling of suffocation. As the saying goes, the older you are, the wiser you are. As a magician who had lived for more than 160 years, and as the first Tower Master of the Secret Arts Tower, he was very good at self-cultivation. The feeling of suffocation was about to explode. The first Tower Master nodded without any expression on his face. He said with a smile, "You live in the farm nearby, right?" Almost at the moment when the other party revealed his gender, the suffocated Tower Master quickly found a corresponding reason. He knew how the vampire clan's farm operated and was even more clear about the vampire's pursuit of the crop character. Probably this was a crop, created according to the special needs of a certain vampire. But just by looking at the person under the tree, he suddenly understood why those clan vampires were so fanatical about the crop character. For the time being, yes. Boss Luo thought for a while and answered truthfully, "How about you? You don't look like you're from here, right?" The woman in front of him looked at him with hopeful eyes. The curiosity of the unknown made his eyes seem to be covered with a thin layer of starlight. At this time, the first Pagoda Master quietly took a deep breath and quietly avoided those curious eyes. He found a very good excuse, and that was to look in the direction of the source of the chaos. "Well, it's because of some special matters, so I passed by. But don't worry, the chaos will soon stop." Boss Luo thought for a while and also looked at the source of the chaos. But after blocking his perception, he could only vaguely feel a sense of familiarity, and he could only see the shadow of a tree. He was about to lose control. He couldn't help but fall into a dilemma. On the one hand, he wanted to directly break the rules of the game between him and Miss Maid. On the other hand, he tried his best to endure. In the process of enduring, it brought a kind of torment, but it made him feel like he was in danger. He was reluctant to give up and savor it, so there was a very complicated expression on his face. Unknowingly, the first Tower Master was once again attracted by such a face. It was as if there was some kind of magical power in it. Logically speaking, although the first Tower Master had always been studying magic techniques and had never come into contact with women, living like an ascetic, he should not be so troubled. But this kind of natural peace was like a treasure in the world. As long as he stayed beside her, he would be able to calm down. It was as if she could understand his every thought and was very comfortable with his feelings. It was really a dreamy characteristic. Even though he was a man, he had the beautiful qualities that this Tower Master, who lived an ascetic life, once had when he was young, had when he was looking forward to women. "Have you ever thought of leaving this farm?" Subconsciously, the first Tower Master asked a question that even he felt was abrupt, because he knew that crops would never have the idea of leaving. This was a qualified crop for the vampire clan. If he enlightened crops with this idea, it was equal to breaking some of the hidden rules between the two forces. But he didn't seem to regret it. "Leave this place?" Boss Luo said subconsciously, "but I haven't thought of where to go next. Let's talk about it later. I really want to activate omniscience. I already have this idea. If that's the case, it's not considered breaking the rules, right?" The first Tower Master's eyes lit up. He stared at the figure under the tree again and deeply imprinted this appearance in his mind. Then he quickly said, "It's too dangerous here. You'd better leave quickly." As he said, the first Tower Master waved the magic wand in his hand. Beside Boss Luo, the light of the magic wand instantly turned into 3 light shields surrounding Boss Luo. Boss Luo didn't feel any danger. His own defense mechanism naturally didn't have any reaction. He couldn't help but curiously look at the small diamond-shaped light shields flying around him. The Radiance Tower Master smiled slightly and said, "This is a protection for you. If you don't want to, they will feel your thoughts and protect you. Remember, at any time, as long as you don't want to, you can do it." This way, even if he was summoned by the vampire clan to sacrifice, he should be safe. Sometimes humans' thoughts were just a moment of impulse and wouldn't go through careful thinking. Such a situation would also happen to Inhuman. Although he was very frustrated, the first Tower Master didn't want this person under the tree to be under the vampire's body in the future. This seems to be something very noble. Boss Luo blinked his eyes, "But I'm really a man." "I know." The Radiance Tower Master smiled casually. He had almost the strongest power in the Inhuman domain and the largest force. Naturally, he didn't care too much about the secular views. You won't have any psychological burden. Being loyal to one's heart, not letting one's heart be tainted, and acting according to one's feelings. The first Tower Master, who was at this level, said frankly, "This doesn't affect my liking for you. However, it's not a relationship between the opposite sex. It's just a pursuit of beauty. At our level, the physical body is secondary. What we like friends and companions, are actually not inferior to lovers and the like. Compared to the pursuit of physical pleasure, the compatibility of the spiritual world is more pleasurable. When the human body can break away from the low-level needs, then we can truly recognize the essence of the human body. Putting aside gender, I feel that we will be friends with many topics to talk about." Not handsome, Boss Luo seemed to be inspired by something. He had reached the limit of wanting to peek at the blonde youth in front of him. It must be a very beautiful soul. This seems to be a culture of the East. Are you also interested in the Taoism of the East? The first Tower Master's eyes lit up again. "Yes, I know a little about it." Boss Luo nodded his head. At this moment, the commotion seemed to have stopped. Hui Yao took a glance at the front. He could tell what he needed to do at what time. So he said directly, "I'm very happy to have met you. I'm looking forward to our next meeting. Perhaps it will be very soon." Hui Yao's figure slowly floated up into the air. He then waved his hand and walked forward. In the next second, he had already disappeared. In the end, he restrained himself and did not pry into the blonde youth's inner thoughts. To some extent, Luocio had a terrifying, self-disciplined character. He slowly exhaled. He only felt a warm feeling from the prayer beads on his wrist. Soon, he calmed down the waves in his heart. After calming himself down, Huiyao slowly descended from the sky. As for the potholes on the ground, he could only pretend that he didn't see them. He just casually waved his magic wand. The soil began to surge. Soon, the surrounding ground was restored to its original state. At this moment, Kelowna's Shinryu leaned against a rock and smoked a cigarette. He looked like an old, unmarried, high-pressure young woman who had just finished a spa session. The word "satisfied" was written all over his face, and he looked radiant. On the other hand, the little butterfly monster lowered her head and looked at the first Tower Master pitifully. Obviously, she felt sorry for not being able to complete her task. Hui Yao waved his hand and told the little butterfly monster not to be too concerned. Then he took a look at Fafnir. Fafnir, who had fallen on the ground, was still in his dragon form. However, both of his eyes had turned white. He was biting his tongue and foaming at the mouth. Then there were only a few pieces of the golden dragon's sturdy dragon scales left. As for his body, it was covered with greenish-black bruises. After that, he flipped over on the ground, and his limbs twitched. Fortunately, he didn't go too far. At this moment, the first Tower Master heaved a long sigh. Well, it was great that he didn't kill him. He shook his head and walked to the front of the golden dragon. Then he placed his magic wand on Fafnir's forehead and lightly tapped it a few times. The dragon's body began to shrink. Finally, it shrunk to the size of a human. However, this wasn't the golden dragon's original form. Therefore, it couldn't bring its own clothes. The Radiance Tower master glanced at the golden dragon's flat, private part and sighed again. In order to protect the young dragon, Kelowna's Shinryu directly waved his hand and covered the little butterfly monster's eyes. The Radiance Tower Master nodded his magic wand again. A long cloth appeared in the air and wrapped around Fafner's body. Then he sighed and said, "Teacher, I heard that the East has a kind of magic that can regenerate broken limbs. Is it useful?" Long Shirua glanced at Fafner again and shook her head. "How many times have I told you? Just use the Taoist technique. Forget it. This kind of Taoist technique needs to be cultivated by oneself. This guy can't cultivate it. There's some medicine that can regenerate broken limbs. However, it's in the Xianyuan Palace's treasure vault. Even I can't just go in and take it." The Radiance Tower Master nodded. "It seems that we can only see if we can refine a 6-star regeneration potion. This is a headache. If we can find that Master Rainbow Potion. Don't you have 2 secret potion masters in your secret arts tower?" Long Shirua asked, puzzled. "Those 2 masters aren't good at this kind of secret potion." The Radiance Tower Master shook his head and sighed. "However, we can still give it a try. We can't let the golden dragon die out in this generation. If that's the case, I'll be ashamed to face old Fafner." Okay. Kelowna's Shinryu couldn't bear to see such a lamenting appearance. "If there's no other way, I'll just go to the Xianyuan Palace. This old face of mine should still be useful." The Radiance Tower Master directly bowed to Kelowna's Shinryu as a disciple. "Okay, let's go now." Long Shirua asked directly. The Radiance Tower Master pondered for a moment and suddenly said, "Teacher, can you take Fafner to a place to rest first? I still have something to do. I want to find the acting Grand Duke of the Torito clan." "What's the matter?" Long Shirua was startled. Then his face changed slightly. "Wait. Don't tell me you're going to talk about the compensation? Let's make it clear first. The one who caused the destruction is this damn pervert. It has nothing to do with me. I'm afraid the compensation can't be negotiated in just a few words." Hui Yao could only smile bitterly. "It's just a private matter. Teacher, don't worry." Long Shirua pondered for a moment and nodded dubiously. "Okay. No, you can't go for too long. I don't know if I can hold back when this guy wakes up." After saying that, Kelowna's Shinryu stretched out his hand, wanting to grab Fafner's arm and lift him up. However, after thinking for a while, he wrapped his hand with a cloth with a disgusted look. Then he grabbed Fafner's hair and pulled him up. "I'll wait for you in front." Long Shirua pointed at the place where the lights were flashing in front of them. Farm Town. The Radiance Tower Master immediately opened his mouth. Kelowna's Shinryu waved his hand and said, "Don't worry, I won't cause any trouble. I'm just sweating and I'm looking for a place to wash myself. Isn't there a villa over there?" She pointed at a lonely villa at the edge of Farm Town and said sincerely, "I really won't cause any trouble." It shouldn't be a problem. She knew her limits. In the end, the first Tower Master chose to believe her for the sake of their friendship in the past. Just as he said, he was the type who was easy to believe. After a while, "Master." Miss Maid appeared behind Boss Luo like a shadow. She came back because she had dealt with the things in the cave. Therefore, Luochio didn't know the answer and asked, "It seems that there was a disturbance just now. Did you investigate it when you came back?" The answer was yes. He was very clear about Miss Maid's action pattern. It seemed to be Miss Long and Miss Pianxian. Miss Maid smiled and said, "They seem to have a conflict with the Golden Dragon. So they came here too." Luochio only felt interesting. At the same time, he was relieved of the familiar feeling when the disturbance happened just now. "The reason is unknown." Miss Maid nodded. "Do you need to inquire about it?" "No." Boss Luo shook his head. "I feel I should be able to see them soon. That's all for now." After saying that, Boss Luo sat down again and prepared to finish the second diary that he hadn't finished yet. The flowers here are good. I want to pick some back. Miss Maid looked at the small cluster of flowers in front of her and whispered, If you can see them, Miss Pianxian may like them. Boss Luo smiled. You seem to like that child very much. Isn't it the same for you, master? Miss Maid chuckled. Boss Luo didn't reply. He just smiled casually and opened the diary, reading it carefully. Yi sat down in the cluster of flowers. Her loose skirt seemed to be one of the flowers in the sea of flowers. She took a fancy to some Austin Chinese roses. She smiled and reached out to pick them. The Chinese roses gradually turned into pink and white flower balls in her hands. Boss Luo suddenly looked up and chuckled, like a bride. Chapter 1360. What do you want to do? In front of the door of the small villa, Long Shura was stunned when she saw the butterfly monster was about to knock on the door. Knock on the door. Sure enough, Long Shura shook her head and said like an experienced person, Listen, we're just waiting here for a while. There's no need to disturb the guy inside. Well, it's a bit strange. As she spoke, she used her hand to push the little butterfly monster behind her, and then casually threw the golden dragon on the ground, and then tentatively pushed open the villa's door. Squeak! The vestibule at the entrance was dim, but there was a faint light at the front of the corridor. The true dragon of the divine land glanced at it, pondered for a while, and walked in directly. Sister Long, you didn't take off your shoes. Don't be fooled by her harsh tone. In fact, she was just angry. Looking back at the big-breasted butterfly's serious face, the true dragon of the godly land raised her hand and pinched her fingers into the shape of a drill bit. She looked like a mother teaching her daughter. The butterfly monster held her head and didn't squat down. Long Shura then made a gesture of silence, and then walked towards the light, which came from the crack of the door, and when she was about to reach the door, Long Shura unexpectedly found a big hole in the ceiling of the corridor. It seemed to be hit by something. Why did she feel that this place was full of the smell of golden dragon Fafnir, and there seemed to be a very special fragrance left? The perfume smell was a bit familiar. She seemed to have felt it somewhere before. Before she was confused, Long Shura tilted her head and gently pushed the door of the living room. The door opened slowly, and she looked in. Long Shura just stood at the entrance of the living room for a long time. Luo Dance was really anxious, so she held the golden dragon with both hands, closed the door, and dragged it into the corridor. She came to Kelowna's Shinryu and called softly, Sister Long. Long Shirua just pointed at the living room. Little butterfly monster subconsciously looked inside and saw that the living room was very bright. It was an old European style from decades ago. Then she saw a woman sleeping on the carpet. To be precise, he had fainted on the ground. This person, is he injured? Would you get hurt in your own home? Long Shirua snapped. Of course. Sometimes I'll hit my head or toe. Thus, Kelowna's Shinryu pinched her fingers into a drill, bit again. When the little butterfly monster was rubbing her head, Shinryu had already walked to the side of this woman who couldn't get up from the ground. He flipped this woman over. What entered his eyes was a pair of shameful things that didn't lose to the butterfly monster. TSK. Long Shirua pursed her lips, then stretched out her fingers to the woman's neck and opened the woman's collar a little, revealing 2 small wounds on her neck. Long Shirua rubbed her chin, looking at the little butterfly monster's eyes, thinking, This woman has probably just been bitten by a vampire. She should have fainted due to anemia. Vampire. Luo Dance suddenly looked around nervously. He should have left after sucking the blood. I don't feel any other aura in this house except for this woman, Shinryu said casually, but there is a smell of urine and perfume. Perfume? The little butterfly monster subconsciously sniffed a few times. It's really perfume. It smells like Sister Yi. What? Shinryu frowned. You mean the two-faced woman who stuck to that profiteer all day long and acted coquettishly? How could she be here? You're right. Little butterfly monster nodded. In order to avoid the pain of the drill, She automatically ignored Kelowna Shinryu's description of Miss Servant Girl. At this moment, she helped the woman on the ground to the sofa and put her down. Sister Long, are we going to wait here for Mr. Hui Yao to come back? Long Shirua said directly, this woman won't wake up for a while. Generally speaking, vampires like to find a place to lie down after eating, in the name of enjoying the aftertaste. In fact, it's like taking drugs and entering the useless mode. They won't come back for a while. This place is at the edge of the farm, so we can stay here for a while. You keep an eye on Fafner here, and I'll walk around the house. I feel uncomfortable all over. With that, Kelowna Shinryu muttered. In the palm of her hand, a golden rope slowly stretched out and then wrapped around Fafner's body, tying it up. She put her palms together and then opened them. Then something spread out from her body and spread all over the living room. I've set up a barrier here. Before I come back, don't leave this living room. Long Shirua thought for a while and felt worried. She tied up the woman who had fainted as well. Be good and wait here for me to come back. If this thing wakes up and you find it noisy, just find something to stuff its mouth. Okay. Late at night, the castle of the Torito clan had almost been cleaned up. All the valuable, undamaged, or restorable works of art had been cleared out. However, many of the vampires were heartbroken when they saw that a large number of works of art had been completely destroyed in this disaster. This clan was the group that pursued art and beauty the most among the 13 clans. As they spoke, their hatred for the Golden Dragon gradually increased. At this time, Beiligin was inspecting the east wing of the original castle. He bent down and picked up a deformed golden cup from the ground, swept the dust on it. Finally, he shook his head and threw the cup back to the ground. Beiligin. At the same time, Kaloya and the Misteel Tower Master came together. Seeing the arrival of the Misteel Tower Master, Bailgan's face was more or less like a reunion after a long separation. Unlike the werewolf Kaloya, who rarely interacted with each other, acting Grand Duke Beiligin was much more courteous toward this Mithril Tower Master. Beiligin, I've heard the general situation from Kaloya. The Misteel Tower Master went straight to the point. I want to know if you already have any plans for gathering us here. In the end, after waiting for a long time, only you and Kaloya came. Beiligin shook his head. There are fewer people than I expected. After all, it's too unbelievable. The Misteel Tower Master shook his head. You should know that it's already 100 years ago, and in these 100 years it's been peaceful. Most of the new generation doesn't know about those guys. As for the other guys, they might just be watching if they don't come. I have a rough idea of their attitude. Beiligin waved his hand. By the way, have you told this matter to your Radiance Tower Master? Not yet. The Misteel Tower Master shook his head and said, Before the matter has conclusive evidence, I don't intend to attract too much attention. If it's just a false alarm, I'll just treat it as if I'm just here to visit my former comrades. I'm afraid you'll be disappointed. Beiligin laughed bitterly. I'm afraid the ones I encountered this time are more terrifying than the ones back then. In front of one of them, I couldn't even resist. You after 100 years. Kaloya could not help but frown directly. Unlike him, because he was old, his bodily functions had begun to decline, and his strength had been greatly reduced. For creatures like vampires, the older they were, the stronger they were. No one knew to what extent Beiligin had evolved 100 years after that war. Kaloya suddenly said, In the first 10 years after the war, you were fully capable of becoming the 14th Grand Duke, right? Beiligin said indifferently, 100 years ago, if the team that joined the coalition army was not us, but the Grand Duke, the Beast King, and the Radiance Tower Master, how much do you think the survival rate would have increased? Our survival rate back then was less than 1%, about 20%. Kaloya scratched his head. He was not good at calculating this kind of data. However, even if it was a tragic victory 100 years ago, after 100 years of cultivation, The new generation has also grown up. Overall, I feel that the overall strength of the current in human domain is much stronger than when it was established 100 years ago. And we still have the spoils of war. You want to fight? The Misteel Tower Master frowned and looked at this guy who was past his prime, but was still warlike in nature. If you're scared, then be scared. Don't use words like strategic compromise. Kaloya said in a deep voice, werewolves only have warriors who stand and face the enemy. There are no cowards who retreat. Baligan, you were the one who discovered this time, and you were the one who gathered them. Do you want to fight or what? Speak. I'm really glad that you weren't the commander back then. Baligan shook his head in annoyance. Fight or not? I want to go to the battlefield back then and take a look. I'll decide after that. Battlefield. The Misteel Tower Master was startled. What's there to see? We've been exploring that place for 10 years after the war, but we didn't find anything. No, Baligan said seriously. I had the same idea before. But after today, I have a feeling that we've forgotten something back then. I have a feeling that we might be able to find the answer if we go there again. Holding a doubtful attitude, Kaloya muttered to himself in silence. What do you want us to do? The Misteel Tower Master asked directly. Baligan said, I was going to go with you, but I want to take care of things here first, so it might be a little later. How about giving me half a day? Kaloya sneered. Those guys have reappeared, and you still have the leisure to clean up the place? But you don't know that 12 Grand Dukes have just died. Baligan just glanced at this rude guy indifferently. He really couldn't understand how this guy could create so many highly artistic scripts. It was simply illogical. All right. The Misteel Tower Master nodded. The battlefield is sealed anyway, and it will take some time to open the seal. Then I'll go with Kaloya first, and you follow behind. It was obvious that the Misteel Tower Master was a man of action. As he spoke, he had already summoned the flying carpet and stepped on it. Kaloya! See you later, vampire. The werewolf hero shrugged and jumped on the flying carpet. In the blink of an eye, the flying carpet had already rushed into the air. Looking at the flying carpet in the distance, Baligan said quietly, Only 2. It seems that my integrity is really tested, shaking his head. Bailey began to wander around the castle ruins again. Not long after, a vampire came forward to report that Baysby had successfully survived the Lost Rift and had arrived at the farm. Ask him to come and see me. Baligan thought for a moment and then gave the order. After the vampire left, Baligan came to the edge of the rift and looked at the bottomless place below, falling into deep thought. Before the 12 Grand Dukes died, they said that something had happened in the rift. But before he had time to inquire about it, he felt that things had suddenly become chaotic. From the appearance of the people in that place to the Golden Dragon's rebellion, the death of the 12 Grand Dukes, and the rift's change, it had only been less than a day. He could not even find a complete sequence of events from so much information. While thinking, Baligan suddenly felt something. His expression changed slightly, then he adjusted his emotions and slowly turned around. He saw that not far from the cliff, a figure had arrived at some point. This figure was wrapped in a faint light, and it was difficult for Baligan to see the figure's true appearance. But he knew the figure's identity very well. Baligan slowly stepped forward. I really didn't expect that the things here would alarm you. So, Tower Master of Radiance, is there anything I can help you with? The person who appeared here was the first Tower Master of the Magician Association's Secret Arts Tower, Radiance, who had just bid farewell to Long Shiro. Bathed in light and shadow, the Tower Master of Radiance looked completely different when he faced the acting Grand Duke of the clan compared to when he faced Kelowna Shinryu. Just like when he was in the Secret Arts Tower, he was full of majesty. This kind of sizing up seemed to be trying to see through Baligan. It was just that the acting Grand Duke's face was calm, and there was nothing to nitpick about his bearing and behavior. The Tower Master of Radiance said slowly regarding the rebellion of the Golden Dragon, Fafnir, It is indeed our association's failure to supervise. I will send someone to verify the Torito clan's losses this time, and then fully compensate you. To be able to alarm the Tower Master of Radiance and personally come to express your concern. The matter of compensation can be ignored. Bayligin smiled slightly. Besides, the destroyed things are just some dead objects, and we have no real casualties. It's just that the Golden Dragon is also missing here. I hope that the Tower Master of Radiance can find it as soon as possible to avoid greater losses. You can rest assured about this. The Tower Master of Radiance said indifferently, I have found Fafnir. I want to assure you that similar things will not happen again. Since there is a promise from the Tower Master of Radiance, Bayligin is naturally willing to accept it. Bayligin smiled slightly. You are a guest from afar. Why don't you invite the Tower Master of Radiance to the farm? I will entertain you. No need. The Tower Master of the Radiance Tower waved his hand. I'm going to bring Fafnir back soon. Send my regards to the members of the Torito clan who were injured in this disaster. Also, tell them that their stay fees will be halved this year. Thank you very much. The Tower Master of Radiance nodded and seemed to be planning to leave. However, he did not leave just like that, which made Bayligin puzzled. The first Tower Master was silent for a moment before slowly opening his mouth. There is one more thing. Tower Master, please speak. The Tower Master of Radiance was silent for a moment before opening his mouth. I want to ask for one of the crops from your farm. Although crops were the precious property of the clan, it wasn't to the extent that they would be reluctant to give them away when facing the truly powerful beings in the inhuman domain. In fact, because the crops of the clan's farm were too outstanding, some of the local bosses who had connections would occasionally make such a request. What he did not expect was that even the first Tower Master of the Secret Arts Tower would have such a request. Is there a problem? The Tower Master of Radiance asked indifferently. Why did he use this kind of light and shadow effect? Naturally, it was because he felt that this kind of behavior was too shameful. Of course not. Bayligin hurriedly said, since the Tower Master has taken a fancy to it, it is naturally our honor. Then, may I know who the Tower Master is referring to in the farm? I will definitely deliver it personally. The Tower Master of Radiance opened his mouth. Here came the embarrassing thing. He did not know the name of the person under the tree. He actually forgot to ask him. Bayligin subconsciously opened his mouth. It's him, not her. In the Western language, the distinction between him and her was very clear. The Tower Master of Radiance immediately shook his head and waved his hand. In front of Bayligin, another light and shadow slowly appeared. The light and shadow gradually became clearer, and it seemed to be a woman. At least, it was dressed like a woman. However, when this figure was about to fully appear, her face was covered with a layer of mist, and it was impossible to see any trace of her appearance. Tower Master of Radiance, this is? Bayligin was puzzled again. It was not only the acting Grand Duke who was puzzled. The first Tower Master of the Secret Arts Tower was also puzzled. He actually could not recognize the appearance of the person under the tree. This was embarrassing. But the Tower Master was after all, so he said without blushing, he is about 21 or 22 years old, a typical Eastern face, black hair and black eyes. Although he is a male, he is the most ideal type of female. In addition, he may have dabbled in the Eastern Taoist culture. It is really a very special character. The Tower Master of Radiance coughed lightly and said, I just hit it off with him, and I am interested in accepting him as my student. Don't think too much. I won't think too much, definitely. Bayligin nodded seriously. This is my private communication crystal. The Tower Master of Radiance threw a crystal to the acting Grand Duke and disappeared on the spot. Bayligin looked at the first Tower Master's private communication crystal in his hand. He heard that there were not many people in the inhuman domain who had this thing. But when did Farm have such a character design? Bayligin could not help but fall into deep confusion. After all, no matter what, he was still a dormitory supervisor who cultivated one crop after another. Chapter 1361. Inhuman Territory, Magician Association Headquarters. The dragon of Audiobook floating in the sky whispered discontentedly from time to time. The evilest knight was still stepping on its body and holding the granddaughter of the Sword Saint hostage. Looking at the crowd outside the Magician Association headquarters, Ms. Witch was surprised and asked curiously, "Today is the Magician Association's rice distribution day. Why are there so many people?" Of course, her question was not answered. Farrell just stared at the 200th floor of the Magician Association headquarters and suddenly said, "Hui Yao is not here. Even the secret steel is not here." Ms. Which knew the title of the Tower Master. There was probably no one in the Inhuman Territory who did not know the title of the Tower Master. "How do you know?" Ms. Jillian asked curiously. "When the level of power increases, naturally I can feel it." Farrell's words still shocked the Spirit Witch. Even if she was not as good as the old monsters from 100 years ago, she was not too bad among the new generation. Even if she was not outstanding, she was at least above the standard they used the war 100 years ago as a dividing point, and those who grew up after the war were all called the new generation. The granddaughter of the Sword Saint was holding the pillow anxiously. She opened her mouth several times but could not say anything. However, she vaguely knew something from the conversation between Farrell and the Spirit Witch. The two mentioned the war of 100 years, they came back, and so on. Although she was not from that era, as the granddaughter of the Sword Saint, she was involved in the history of 100 years ago. Generally speaking, she would know more than the ordinary new generation. It seemed like 100 years ago, the enemy that her grandfather, as the commander of the Allied forces, led the Allied forces to fight against had appeared again? Sir Farrell. The granddaughter of the Sword Saint finally gathered enough courage and whispered, "Excuse me, can I go home now?" Farrell looked back, and the granddaughter of the Sword Saint tensed up. She did not even dare to look at him in the eyes. Farrell said, "You need to inherit your grandfather's responsibility. He was our commander in the beginning. Even if you are not qualified to be the commander, as his descendant, you can't retreat and disgrace the name of the Sword Saint." The Sword Saint's granddaughter. Leia pursed her lips and said in an even softer voice, I didn't." Without a word, Farrell dashed forward and slapped Leia's face, smack. No one would have thought that Roland would slap the fat maiden. Anyway, Miss Witch was so shocked that her jaw almost fell off her face. "I don't need someone weak, and I don't need someone who isn't confident." Looking at the helpless, frightened, and aggrieved fat girl who was covering her face, Farlier's heart was as hard as steel. "I don't care how you feel. If the other you is more suitable, then I will need the other you. Now, whether you live or die, whether you exist or disappear, it doesn't matter. Or rather, please disappear right now. I only need your ability. I'm not going to help you get rid of anything like a life coach. Please show me the aura of a swordsman when you point your sword at me." So hardcore? Miss, which murmured in her throat while cursing this old guy in her heart for being a lunatic. Leia lowered her head and hugged her pillow, her body trembling slightly. The dragon of Audiobook couldn't stand it anymore and said angrily, "Old lunatic, you're too much. At least consider Leia's feelings. What do you know?" Farrell said calmly, "I don't need to know anything. Everyone in the world carries different things. No one is special, other than children. No one deserves to be taken care of. You, change course." Farrell snorted and exerted some force on his feet, pushing the dragon of Audiobook down a little. "Go to the Orc territory." "I'm not going." The black dragon was also furious. Farrell reached out and grabbed without saying anything. The air in the sky instantly formed a long sword of air in his palm and slashed across the dragon's back. The sturdy dragon scales instantly broke, and a 2-meter-long wound appeared on the dragon's back. The skin and flesh were torn open. Ajuin couldn't help but roar in pain. The dragon's roar attracted the attention of the people below. But when the non-humans on the ground looked up, they only saw a tail of air in the clouds. That sounded like a dragon's roar. The golden dragon is here again. Open the door. Open the door. My loss hasn't been registered yet. Business ape of the association. Don't force me to steal your wives. Come out. The 200th floor of the association headquarters. The Magician Association's Secret Arts Tower currently had a total of 5 Tower Masters. They were the first Tower Master Hui Yao, the Crimson Blaze Tower Master, the Ice Tower Master, the Thunder Tower Master, and the Mithril Tower Master, who was promoted due to his merits. At this time, the Crimson Blaze Tower Master and the Ice Tower Master, who were imprisoned by the first Tower Master, were still imprisoned. The first Tower Master and the Mithril Tower Master were nowhere to be found. Only the Thunder Tower Master, who was in charge of the Secret Arts Tower, was left in the Secret Arts Tower. Speaking of this Thunder Tower Master, he was much older than the other 4 Tower Masters. From the modern world to the completion of the construction of the Inhuman domain to entering this domain, it could be said that this Thunder Tower Master had witnessed the prosperity of the Magician Association over the past hundreds of years, and had also experienced several internal turmoil in the association. The members of the Thunder Tower Master had always been changing. Only the Thunder Tower Master had never changed in all these years. In a huge room, the Thunder Tower Master looked at the night sky through the circular floor-to-ceiling window. This sound seems to be Roland's dragon. He shook his head. For some reason, this Thunder Tower Master, who had experienced many storms, had a feeling that a storm was coming. This might be the so-called 6th sense of a high-level non-human. He looked at the suffering people gathered below and couldn't help but have a headache. After dealing with these things, he still couldn't go home and tell his granddaughter bedtime stories to coax her to sleep. These young people really don't care about the elderly at all. The Thunder Tower Master sighed, then waved his hand and said in a low voice, "Make me a pot of coffee." "Who is it?" This Thunder Tower Master was still a treasure. The moment he sensed that there was another intruder, he reacted at lightning speed. The magic wand slipped from his sleeve, and he grabbed it in his hand. The moment he turned around, the magic wand also directly pointed at the intruder. In an instant, lightning shot out from the magic wand and then turned into a lightning tree. The jagged lightning directly covered every corner of the room. The place where the lightning couldn't reach quickly appeared. In the corner, the sky seemed to have collapsed. When the branches of the lightning tree reached here, they were directly sucked in. Then the surrounding space began to become three-dimensional. It was as if dozens of prism mirrors were placed here. These mirrors then shattered and the fragments scattered. However, in an instant, the lightning tree completely withered, and the Thunder Tower Master couldn't help but take 2 steps back. The Thunder Tower Master was slightly shocked, but he managed to calm himself down. Looking at the source of the spatial anomaly, the Thunder Tower Master frowned. Then, as if he had thought of something, his expression suddenly changed. "You haven't died yet?" The scattered mirrors on the ground suddenly gathered in this special space. They gathered together, as if they were randomly crumpled into a ball of glass shards. Then a figure began to appear. When this figure completely appeared, the Thunder Tower Master's gaze suddenly became flustered. He quickly raised the magic wand in his hand. But a strong light instantly covered the entire area. This strong light even penetrated the flower window here and shot out of the tower, alarming the people on the ground below the 200th floor. When the magician in the tower hurriedly knocked on the door of the Thunder Tower Master's office, he saw the Thunder Tower Master standing in front of the window with his hands behind his back. "Tower Master, just now?" "Nothing. I just thought of a technique and casually tested it." The Thunder Tower Master didn't turn his head, only giving a simple explanation. "I see." The magician nodded and didn't suspect anything. He continued, "Oh, right, Tower Master, did you call for me just now? I seem to have heard your voice transmission." The Thunder Tower Master slowly turned around and said with a smile, "Oh, I want you to make a pot of coffee for me." "Okay, I'll go right away." When the magician left and closed the door, the smile on the Thunder Tower Master's face disappeared. He looked around the room. When he walked past the office desk, he stretched out his hand and slowly swept the edge of the desk. He closed his eyes, as if he was feeling something, and muttered to himself. "It's been some time since I came back here." He slowly stretched out his hand, and a ball of light slowly floated out from his palm. The ball of light vibrated, occasionally sweeping across an angry and frightened face, the face of the Thunder Tower Master. Not only did she put the unconscious woman on the sofa, the diligent butterfly monster also put the unconscious golden dragon, who was hammered by Sister Long, on the sofa. She found some water in the living room. The butterfly monster, who was used to nursing, thought for a while, washing 2 pieces of cloth, and then began to wipe the woman and golden dragon's face. At this time, Long Shiroa's voice suddenly rang in her ears. "Sister Long, I've seen this house. There's nothing special." Long Shiroa's voice was very clear. "Oh, I found a good place. Come over." "Where is it?" "A huge bathroom. The temperature of the water is just right. It seems to be specially prepared by someone. Do you remember the pervert Fafner's appearance just now? I think he may have prepared it for himself." "Does Mr. Fafner live here?" Luo Dance was startled. "God knows, maybe he's a dove occupying a magpie's nest. He's not good at other things, but he especially likes to be beautiful and clean. After a day of trouble, not only did you destroy his house, but you also wanted to eat and take here. Whatever, are you coming over or not? If not, wait for me in the living room for a while." "Oh, wait for me," Luo Dance said quickly. Females seemed to be unable to get rid of the temptation of bathing. They had been running around for a long time today. A small hole was opened in the enchantment of the living room. The butterfly monster went through it and soon came to the bathroom mentioned by Long Shiroa. When she opened the door and went in, she saw the steam in the bathroom. Long Shiroa had already sat on the edge of the small swimming pool, directly soaking her body, showing a satisfied face. "Ah, I feel like I'm alive." Kelowna's Shinryu loosened his neck, then looked at the butterfly monster. "What are you doing? Come down." "Ooh." With that, the butterfly monster grabbed the bottom of the clothes and then turned them up. Finally, after putting the folded clothes aside, the butterfly monster walked a few steps with a cheerful laugh, and then directly jumped into the bath. The water splashed everywhere, and she happily played in the water like a child. "Really, why are you so happy?" Long Shiroa held her cheek with a gentle look. The butterfly monster swam in the water like paparazzi, hearing that, "because this is the first time I'm taking a bath with Sister Long. I didn't even try it in the hospital." Kelowna's Shinryu snorted. "The bathroom in the hospital only has a small bathtub. I'm sorry." I didn't mean that." "No, I mean, I'm teasing you, silly girl." Long Shiroa smiled, then turned around, revealing her smooth back. "Come and give me a massage. I always feel that my shoulders are a bit heavy recently. I'm at the age of being tortured by pressure." "Okay." Swimming behind Long Shiroa, the little butterfly monster easily found a towel for wiping her back, various kinds of shampoo, and a basin with transparent viscous liquid in the pile of things beside the bathtub. "What's this?" The butterfly monster used her finger to touch the viscous liquid in the basin. The liquid connected into a crystal silk thread. The true dragon, who was lying on the edge of the pool, glanced at it and subconsciously said, "Collagen lubricant, isn't it? Isn't there a lot of films in traditional baths? It's for applying on the body." "What's a film of traditional baths?" The butterfly monster blinked her eyes. "It's a teaching video of a different kind of massage therapy," Kelowna Shinryu said without blushing. "I'll teach you when you're older." The butterfly monster tilted her head and thought for a while. her fingers rubbing the slippery liquid on her fingertips. Then she directly applied it on Shinryu's back. "Is it like this?" The cold feeling made this Shinryu shiver all over. "Don't apply it on me," Long Shirwa uncomfortably roared twice. "This stuff is applied on the massager's body." "Is it like this?" Hearing this, the butterfly monster grabbed another handful of lubricant and began to apply it on her body. The tender white skin seemed to be plated with a thin layer of crystal. She tried to rub her body with her hands, and then laughed. "Wow, it's slippery, so interesting. Sister Long, try it too." With that, before Shinryu could react, the butterfly monster directly hugged him. The trembling ball was suddenly squeezed together. A rather subtle feeling made the true dragon shudder again. Should it be said that this was something that he had learned without a teacher? Hee Itchy, so comfortable. Damn it, don't touch there! Sister Long, are you ticklish? Well, Agile, it seems that you've forgotten the fear of being controlled by the dragon claw. You want to run away after offending me. Secret skill, 48 hands. Chirp. Today's harvest is good. In front of the villa, Miss Maid, who was holding a bunch of Austin roses in her hand, said with a smile. In front of the door, Boss Luo stopped and smiled. Well, it's quite lively inside. Miss Maid heard it and listened carefully. She didn't have any perception, but it didn't mean that her hearing was weak. She heard the faint sound and covered her mouth with her small hand. "Oh, it seems it's true." /1 answer. Chapter 1362. The temperature of the water in the bathtub didn't seem to drop with the passage of time. The constant temperature design of the bathtub made the bathtub more and more hazy. She seemed to have walked into a foggy place. She could vaguely see two figures sticking together at the edge of the bathtub. Occasionally, some strange moans and gasps could be heard. Sister Long, I feel that my body has become strange, just like the last time. It felt like drinking some kind of lemon tea. After taking a sip, she couldn't help but continue to suck it subconsciously until she felt refreshed. Kelowna Shinryu was in such a state. At first, she just wanted to retaliate by using her hands, but then she couldn't stop. Her hands seemed to be out of her control, and she became more and more skilled in using the secret technique. She couldn't stop at all. The feeling of bullying this little butterfly monster was too wonderful. Well, the little butterfly monster was lying on the edge of the bathtub, weak all over. She opened her mouth slightly, Sister Long. At the same time, the two thin, colorful butterfly wings on her slender back were like flower buds in the water, waiting to blossom. They spread out little by little. Long Shirwa found another reason for her to stop. "Oh, so you don't have to wait for yourself to enter estrus. You can also do it manually? It seems that I need to study it carefully." But this kind of strange powder, even if she didn't pay attention, she would still fall into it. When the little butterfly's wings were still in the water, the powder had already been secreted and blended into the water. Kelowna's Shinryu was soaking in the bathtub, relaxing all the pores on her body. A little bit of powder that hadn't completely dissolved was now adhering to the Shinryu skin through the vibration of the water, penetrating little by little. But this trace element obviously couldn't be noticed by the Shinryu. Kelowna's Shinryu's attention was now focused on the colorful butterfly wings that were slowly spreading out. Subconsciously, her hands began to move more carefully, trying to explore more forbidden areas that could allow the flower to blossom. While observing the extent of the butterfly's wings, Long Shirwa suddenly wrapped her arms around the little butterfly's body from behind. The more sensitive the area was, the faster the powder would form. The butterfly wings were not fully opened yet. It was like a frosted maple leaf, looking listless. At this time, Luo Dance's breathing frequency unconsciously increased. Her whole body was lying in Shinryu's arms. She felt ashamed and resentful of Sister Long's evil hands. Gradually, her consciousness began to enter a strange state. Under the warm water, she subconsciously clamped her legs together. Between her inner thighs, it seemed to be uncomfortable, so she kept rubbing against each other. Because of the stirring, small ripples appeared in the pool, making it murky. Is it done, Sister Long? Aye. She raised her head. In the warm and humid bathroom, her eyelashes were already wet, as if there were small crystal plates hanging on them. Even his gaze was filled with the water vapor of the tide. It's not enough. Long Shirua chuckled. While observing the changes of the butterfly wings, she lowered her head and her lips began to wander around the ears of the little butterfly. Remember to observe clearly last time. This time, you need to observe more. I'm beginning to be interested in your strange changes. I really don't know what that girl fed you to make you become like this. But Shinryu's secret skill seemed to have reached a limit. Though the butterfly wings had blossomed, it hadn't reached the limit. The magical powder had been formed, but the amount was far less than the last time when the little butterfly entered estrus. The quality was also quite bad. Was it because the stimulation was not enough? Long Shirua pondered for a moment, directly grabbing the weak arm of the little butterfly, whispering, "Next, try it yourself, like what I did just now." "No, don't." The little butterfly's remaining reason made the little butterfly resist this suggestion that made her heart beat faster, but her arm didn't have any strength. Even though she resisted verbally, under the guidance of Kelowna Shinryu, she began to touch her body subconsciously. The butterfly wings that hadn't blossomed for a long time seemed to have opened a little because of this stimulation. Long Shirua noticed the changes of the butterfly wings. Suddenly, she had the feeling of many years ago, when she was still living in Shenyuan Palace, when she woke up in the middle of the night and watched the flowers bloom. Long Shirua's hands suddenly stopped. "Seems like someone broke into my barrier." Kelowna Shinryu's eyes suddenly showed a trace of cold light, and she jumped out of the bathtub at the fastest speed. It was too time-consuming to wear clothes, so she reached out and grabbed a bath towel, directly wrapping it around her body. The little butterfly woke up at once. She shook the butterfly wings on her back uncomfortably, and then a little powder fell into the bathtub. She didn't care about it, but seeing Long Shirua had rushed out of the bathroom, she wrapped the towel around herself and grabbed the clothes on the side of the bathtub, hurriedly flapping her butterfly wings and flying out of the bathtub. In the corridor, Miss Maid, holding a bouquet, walked side by side with Boss Luo, coming to the door of the living room. After thinking for a while, Boss Luo wiped off his clothes and returned to his original appearance. He didn't care about anything, but it was also a kind of politeness to maintain his appearance in front of acquaintances. Based on this idea, Boss Luo said to Miss Maid in a low voice after returning to his original appearance, "Next time you want to dress up, you have to use the promise card." How could she be willing to use such a precious thing? She said she would collect them one by one. Luochio pushed open the door of the living room, and the barrier set up here blocked them. Luochio didn't have the habit of breaking in, but after seeing Fafner tied up in the barrier, and Teresa, he directly walked into the barrier. He didn't destroy it, but directly went to the bow of the ship. Although he didn't know why the golden dragon was tied up here, he thought it had something to do with the blonde young man he met in the forest and Kelowna Shinryu. Miss Teresa seems to have had her blood sucked. Miss Maid, on the other hand, was obviously more concerned about Teresa. Of course, her concern was relative to the golden dragon. Between the two fainted guys, Miss Maid didn't hesitate to give up the golden dragon. That was all. Blood-sucking. Luochio thought for a while. It should have happened after we went out. It should be. Miss Maid checked the wound on Teresa's neck and said, "It may be the work of a vampire in the farm, but it's hard to say now. Maybe it's the vampire called Norman. Of course, Miss Long may know something." Luochio waved his hand. "It's very impolite to disturb a woman's bath. Let's wait here." Miss Maid said softly, "Then I'll find a vase and put these flowers in it." Luochio nodded. After Miss Maid walked away, he subconsciously reached out to touch the wound on Teresa's neck. But when his fingers were about to touch it, he withdrew his hand. He looked at his palm, then shook his head. He felt that sometimes a habit was even more terrible. Boss Luo suddenly turned around and said to Miss Maid, who hadn't gone far, "We should prepare some tea, right?" "Of course." Miss Maid nodded and walked towards the kitchen. Long Shiro rushed all the way to the door of the living room. But she suddenly stopped. She felt a sudden rush of blood, and an uncomfortable feeling made her hesitate for a moment. She frowned and finally pushed the door of the living room open directly. In the living room, because Huang Jinlong and Teresa were lying on the sofa, Boss Luo simply stood and admired the hanging paintings in the living room. It wasn't Miss Maid who opened the door, but Kelowna's Shinryu with wet hair wrapped in a bath towel. Boss Luo was quite surprised by her appearance. Long Shiro was now frozen on the spot. She couldn't find any response. "We meet again, Miss Long." Boss Luo took the initiative to greet her. "I didn't want to disturb you, but it seems that I did." "What?" Kelowna's Shinryu was stunned, and then she realized that the current situation was not good. She had never thought of this kind of meeting. "Wait, when did this profiteer come in? What happened in the bathroom?" Thinking of this terrible possibility, Kelowna's Shinryu just wanted to find a hole to hide in. Nothing. This profiteer always saw her worst side every time. "No, don't think too much." Long Shiro was slightly angry. "Peeping Tom! Pervert! Damn profiteer! You, what are you doing here?" "I think, at least for this room, I should be early." Luo Chio smiled. "It seems that Miss Long is still wary of me. If it's because of what happened last time, then I apologize to you again." Apologize? The true dragon of the Divine Land could still restrain herself if she did not mention that incident. But once it was mentioned, she felt ashamed all of a sudden. She sneered and said, "You've already hit me. Is it something that can be forgotten with an apology? Then, how about I owe you a request?" Luochio thought for a while and said, "As long as it doesn't break the principle of the deal, I'll agree to it." "Of course. I'll consider the specific request." Long Shiro sneered. "It's based on the price that Su Zijuan gave you last time, right? I know you're not that kind. If Miss Long feels that this is a very bad memory, I can also help you erase it." Boss Luo gave compromise. "If you want to erase it, you should do it yourself." Kelowna's Shinryu couldn't suppress her anger anymore and raised her voice. Boss Luo said, "This may be a little difficult because for me, this is also a very good memory. I think I'll never forget Miss Long's appearance at that time. A crying woman is actually very beautiful. If I really forget it, it will be a regret for me." You, what nonsense are you talking about?" Kelowna's Shinryu suddenly felt a little dizzy. She rubbed her forehead and calmed herself down. "Let's not talk about this first. You haven't told me what you're doing here." "Because I received a request, so I came in." Boss Luo smiled. "But I can't tell you the content of the request." "Humph, I'm not interested." Long Shiro snorted. "Sister Long." At this moment, the little butterfly monster opened her butterfly wings and hurriedly flew over from the end of the corridor. Long Shiro turned her head and looked at Luochio, who was in the living room. Then she looked at the little butterfly monster and her own appearance. She became a little flustered. "Wait, don't come over." "Stop." Although the little butterfly monster had the power of a high-level monster, she was still a newbie in the monster world. Hearing this, she was stunned. When she came back to her senses, she couldn't stop and directly hit Long Shiro. Seeing this, the true dragon of the Divine Land reacted quickly. With a wave of his hand, he stopped the impudent butterfly demon and slapped it down. Whoosh! Finally, Luo Dance didn't appear in the sight of that profiteer. She stopped at the end of the corridor. Who knew if this profiteer would be beastly when he saw Luo Dance's lustful appearance? This profiteer seemed to be very interested in Luo Dance all the time. Finally, Luo Dance stopped. Kelowna Shinryu breathed a sigh of relief and subconsciously wiped her forehead. Unexpectedly, her continuous movement loosened the bath towel on her body and directly slipped down from her chest. She only felt that her chest was suddenly loosened. She subconsciously looked down and found that the bath towel had completely retreated to her abdomen in a few milliseconds. Time seemed to slow down, and everything entered a state of slow motion. In fact, her mind was operating at a high speed at this time, so everything became extremely slow in front of her eyes. Seeing the bath towel falling off little by little, Shinryu slightly opened her mouth, and then a chill invaded her body, making her shiver. She subconsciously stretched out her hand to catch the falling towel and quickly glanced at the living room from the corner of her eyes. That profiteer blinked at this time. Obviously, he had seen everything. She didn't know whether it was shyness or noisy emotions erupting in her heart like a volcano. Even she herself couldn't predict what she would do in the next moment. Boss Luo quickly waved his hand at the moment. Finally, the bath towel completely fell down and folded on the ground, and Kelowna Shinryu's body was instantly changed into a set of black and white maid costume. Wow. Sister Long, you look so good in this costume. The little butterfly monster who fell down on the ground looked up and blurted out. At this time, the true dragon of godly land stared at the clothes on his body in a daze. Instantly his face was hot, but his face was livid. Profiteer, how many times are you going to humiliate me? Seeing this, Boss Luo had to snap his fingers, and the black and white maid costume on Shinryu's body automatically dispersed, and then changed into a set of ordinary clothes, a simple white shirt and jeans. Sorry, because I was in a rush. My first reaction was... Boss Luo shook his head. Don't worry, I can make myself forget the memory just now. Kelowna Shinryu finally exploded at this time. At this time, her body swelled up, and a huge force instantly crushed the door frame, the wall, and the corridor. She lowered her head and walked step by step into the living room, her long hair fluttering in the wind. You said to forget. What's the difference between this and a free prostitute? What kind of profiteer do you think I am? If you dare, turn into a child for me again. Come on. The Kelowna Shinryu in front of him, seemed to be in a strange state. Boss Luo watched as she walked in front of him, her fist exploding with Shinryu's power, and without any hesitation at all, she didn't hesitate to punch towards his chest. Boss Luo frowned. Before she attacked, he finally used his power in the end. He took a step forward and grabbed her wrist first, whispering in a low voice, "The Miss Long I know is very gentle. Do you feel better?" A trace of pink mist came out of Shinryu's body. It was very faint, and it instantly dissipated into the air very quickly. Long Shirua, who came back to her senses, looked at her wrist that was grabbed and met with this profiteer. Luacio's clear eyes. She was stunned for a moment. Then she suddenly used all her strength to shake off Boss Luo's hand. And suddenly, with a strong force, she shook off Boss Luo's hand. Just now, forget what I said. Long Shirua suddenly became expressionless. Nothing happened. As long as you're okay. Luacio nodded. Didn't you just say that you would agree to my request? She lowered her head and suddenly asked. Luacio said seriously, "Are you going to propose it now?" Long Shirua raised her head, looking straight into Luacio's eyes, opened her mouth, then snorted coldly. "You wish. This request, when I think about it, I will definitely make you lose a lot of money. You just wait for me. Then, please be merciful." Boss Luo nodded with a smile. Humph. Shinryu lightly snorted, then strode out of the living room and pulled up the little butterfly who stuck her head out from the corridor. Sister Long, where are we going? I haven't said hello to Boss yet. Change your clothes. I didn't say you can't say hello. Long Shiro muttered. Do you want him to see your naked body like this? The little butterfly thought for a while. But Boss saw me when I broke out of the cocoon. What a sinful beast. Shinryu's face couldn't help but turn green. It was obviously impossible for her to go back immediately. Muttering like this, they found an empty room and walked in to change their clothes. When the servant girl came back with the tea tray, Boss Luo stood quietly, looking at his palm without moving. Master, just now. Master. Luocio was still looking at his palm, but slowly said, Yi, I lost. I couldn't control myself. Luocio slowly raised his palm, then scratched his face. His eyes faintly became chaotic. When I saw her, I really had an impulse to get this bright soul in my hand. The porcelain fell to the ground, and the sound of breaking suddenly sounded. A gentle force directly bumped into Luocio's arms. The servant girl had already taken control of Luocio's body. Please don't become like the previous one, Master. She raised her head and revealed an unprecedentedly flustered expression. Hearing this, Luocio's fingers loosened a little. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath, then slowly exhaled. It seems that I pushed myself too hard. Luocio, who opened his eyes again, calmed down. I made you worry. It's all right now. Really? For the first time, she didn't have her previous confidence. As long as you're always by my side. Luocio lowered his head, kissing her. In the room, Long Shirua, who had changed into her original clothes, was tidying up her clothes in front of the mirror. This was also a memory that was worth keeping. I think I will never forget Miss Long's appearance at that time. If I really forget it, it will become a regret for me. Clap. The true dragon of Godly Land slapped her own face with both hands. This action startled the little butterfly monster who was wearing underwear with her hands behind her back, and the buckle that was fastened with great difficulty suddenly broke open. Sister Long, there are mosquitoes. Long Shirua said indifferently, then turned around. What? Do I look like I lose my temper so easily? Didn't she just lose her temper? Butterfly monster pursed her lips and didn't speak. Long Shirua sighed, then came behind Luo Dance. Let me help you. Hey, hey, hey. Luo Dance stuck out her tongue, and then suddenly said, Sister Long, do you really hate Boss? Why do you quarrel with him every time you meet? Long Shirua opened her mouth, muttering, Probably it's because I'm afraid. Afraid? Luo Dance was stunned. But Boss is very nice, not scary at all. That's the most terrible thing. Kelowna's Shinryu sighed. Even I sometimes am afraid of myself. I'm afraid that I will suddenly lose control one day. If Kelowna's Shinryu is out of control, who in Kelowna can stop it? What's more, that guy, if he loses control, can you imagine what our world will become? Boss, he won't. Butterfly monster suddenly turned around before putting on her underwear. He won't. Looking at the child who was about to cry, Long Shirua shook her head. You have big breasts, you're right, okay? Can you put on your clothes before you talk? Oh. Luo Dance pouted her small mouth and responded. Long Shirua shook her head, thinking that it would be best if it could be so simple. She continued to fasten the strap of Luo Dance's underwear. Kelowna's Shinryu suddenly said, No wonder it's so hard to fasten it. You've grown even taller, little girl. Don't drink milk tomorrow. Sigma, degree, winky face. Chapter 1363. Inside the Torito clan's castle. After meeting with the acting Grand Duke of the clan, Hui Yao, the first Tower Master, did not immediately rush to meet up with Long Shirua. Instead, he quietly hid himself. Speaking of which, when one's strength had reached such a level that one could be called an old monster by an ordinary inhuman, it seemed that he would more or less hide and peep at everything that happened. Whether it was in the modern world or in the inhuman domain where there were many inhumans, there were fewer and fewer things that could arouse their interest. On the contrary, the things that could arouse their interest were intrinsically implicated. If they did not control it well, the consequences and impact would be very huge. If it was just Fafner's occasional madness, Hui Yao could just treat it as Fafner's sudden spasm. He would not personally intervene. At most, he would just let the other Tower Masters deal with it on his behalf. Initially, he intended to let the master of the secret steel tower deal with it. The secret steel is gone. When Hui Yao appeared in front of Baligan, there was nothing he could hide. Logically speaking, the secret steel should have appeared at the first moment. He did not directly summon the secret steel, nor did he intend to let the secret steel know that his whereabouts had been exposed. He only intended to let the secret steel show up on his own. As long as the way of dealing with things was different, the results would be different. What are these guys discussing? The first Tower Master, who had been silently observing everything in the ruins of the clan's castle, could not help but shake his head after a long while. He was not a person who inquired about information. Naturally, he would not be like a spy who kept waiting for the results to appear. Shaking his head, the Tower Master of Hui Yao waved his magic wand. A mirror appeared in front of him. In the Magician Association's headquarters, on the 200th floor, in the Thunder Tower Master's office. You're too impulsive this time. You didn't even inform us beforehand. Even if you're a magician, you still have to abide by the rules of the club. The voice came from one of the pitch-black mirrors on the table. The Thunder Tower Master, who was sipping on his coffee calmly, looked at the few black mirrors and said calmly, "But from the looks of it, I at least got some results." Many times, opportunities are like shooting stars. You don't know when it will appear, but all you need to do is to grab it without hesitation the moment it appears. The Golden Dragon is wreaking havoc. The Secret Steel and Hui Yao have left the Secret Arts Tower at the same time, and the Crimson Flame couple was unexpectedly grounded by Hui Yao, leaving only an ordinary good guy, Thunder. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and it's a pity to miss it. Please don't bring your personal feelings into the day-to-day operations of the club. Another voice came from the other mirror. All these years, you've never given up on the inhuman domain. We all know why. We're not against you wanting revenge, but at least you've made a corresponding contribution while enjoying the resources of the club. The seats aren't fixed. You're not the only one who's suitable for the magician brand. Oh, it seems that so many of my colleagues have a lot of prejudice against me. The Thunder Tower Master smiled and then narrowed his eyes. Or is this the first seat? Sir, the fool's idea? No matter who it is, you just have to remember that this is the rule of the club. Don't take it for granted that you're the second seat of the magician and enjoy the benefits. The Thunder Tower Master put down his coffee cup and pressed his hands on the table. He smiled and said, "I've been quite free these years, unlike all of you who have done so many small things. Yaris!" A cold voice came from one of the mirrors. The Thunder Tower Master sneered and said, "Didn't you say that even the seats have to follow the rules? What's the rule of the club? The seats should be addressed with a name tag. Isn't it written like this?" Humph. The mirror suddenly dimmed and then shattered. Obviously, the other side of the mirror had been cut off. Magician, what are you planning to do? The mirror on the side was silent for a moment and then suddenly asked. The Thunder Tower Master smiled and said, "Nothing much. I just feel that I'm not used to being free for so many years. I don't want to miss you guys and have many subordinates. When I'm lonely, I want to find someone to talk to. So I suddenly had an idea. I want to find a few servants who can help me make coffee and run errands." "You're planning to?" A low voice suddenly came from the mirror. The Thunder Tower Master shrugged. "We understand." The few mirrors suddenly quieted down. The people behind them seemed to have entered another private communication channel. Not long after, the mirrors disappeared one by one. When the last mirror disappeared, the voice sounded again. "Magician, we'll tell the first, the fool, your general idea. Next, we'll discuss this operation. If there are no accidents, you should get the support of the majority and get the support of the operation. It's fine if I'm alone." The Thunder Tower Master waved his hand. "Otherwise, the days are too long and there's nothing to do to pass the time." Then, the voice of the mirror sounded again. However, at this time, the Thunder Tower Master directly waved his hand and broke the mirror that seemed to have something to say. This was because at this time a new mirror was slowly forming in the office. The Thunder Tower Master narrowed his eyes and then sat up straight. The newly formed mirror only reflected the Thunder Tower Master's appearance at this time. It looked like an ordinary mirror. However, a voice had already sounded. It was the voice of the first Tower Master, Hui Yao. Thunder? Is it convenient for you to talk now? The Thunder Tower Master said slowly, Hui Yao. I was still thinking about whether I should report to you. I didn't expect you to take the initiative to call me. At this time, Hui Yao's appearance appeared on the mirror, as well as some of the environment behind him. I'm still in the territory of the Red-Eye clan. However, Fafnir has been recovered. I should be back soon, the Tower Master said directly. The Thunder Tower Master smiled immediately. That's great. You don't know how hard it is for me to deal with these refugees. The Tower Master smiled and said, Don't worry. We still have the ability to compensate for such a small loss. The Thunder Tower Master nodded. That's right. After all, the association has accumulated a lot of wealth over the years. By the way, how long will it take for you to come back? The Tower Master suddenly asked, Thunder, when did you start drinking black coffee? The Thunder Tower Master was stunned. He subconsciously looked at the coffee cup on the table and said calmly, I heard that this thing has a better effect of refreshing. Isn't it all your fault? Why didn't you let me rest in the middle of the night? I'm really sorry. Don't worry, I'll be back soon. The Tower Master smiled and then closed the mirror bit by bit. Then I'll see you later. The Thunder Tower Master nodded. Before the mirror disappeared completely, he laughed in a low voice. After we meet, I'll definitely give you a big surprise. Hui Yao. I wonder what kind of surprise it will be. Suddenly, the voice of the first Tower Master, Hui Yao, came from behind the Thunder Tower Master. However, it was not really behind the Thunder Tower Master. The voice came from the window behind the Thunder Tower Master from the night sky. The Thunder Tower Master's eyes narrowed. He slowly stood up and turned around. Outside the window, he saw a figure floating. Bang! At that moment, the window shattered. The broken glass was like a sharp blade that quickly entered the room. However, these sharp glass shattered right beside the Thunder Tower Master and did not hurt him at all. At that moment, the figure became clear. It was the first Tower Master, Hui Yao. The two of them stared at each other for a while. Then the Thunder Tower Master suddenly smiled and said, How convenient. You're the one who controls the inhuman domain. But to teleport back from such a far place without using a jump, it must have consumed a lot of energy. How did you know? Is it because of the black coffee? No, it's not that the Thunder Tower doesn't drink black coffee. It's just that they don't drink that much. It's something else that made me see through it. The Tower Master looked at him expressionlessly. He was thinking, with the current economic situation of the association, if it was the Thunder Tower Master himself, how could he say that the association was rich? That was right. This association was a complete mess. It was in the red every month. Even the current Tower Master knew about it. Of course, only the current Tower Masters knew about it. If the association was really rich, why would they agree to the Queen of Britain's employment and rent out a divine weapon like the Holy Spear for a few mines in Britain? However, other people would only think that the association's reach was too far and they had ulterior motives for Britain. Other things? Which aspect? The Thunder Tower Master could not help but be curious. I think there's no need for me to tell you about the association in detail. Even if you were the former first Tower Master of the Secret Arts Tower, Hui Yao sighed softly. Mr. Yaris, you shouldn't have appeared again. Little brat. The Thunder Tower Master shook his head. You've made some achievements over the years, but you've completely forgotten. Who was the one who taught you your first magic technique? That's why I only exiled you last time, Mr. Yaris. Huh. The Thunder Tower Master sneered and shook his head. Back then, if it wasn't for that Shinryu from the east who interfered, I'm afraid you'd be a useless person now. Without that Shinryu, I'd like to see how much progress you've made over the past 100 years. I suddenly feel that it's too boring to just compete with you in magic. By the way, I've found some interesting things over the past few years. I'll let you have a look." As he spoke, vortexes appeared one after another behind the Thunder Tower Master. In the beginning, a strange creature that looked like an alien slowly walked out of one of the vortexes. Soon, dozens of such strange creatures walked out. They stood behind the Thunder Tower Master in a dense crowd. These are... The Hui Yao Tower Master frowned. The moment these creatures appeared, he could feel a violent and crazy aura. These creatures seemed to only know how to destroy. They're called Prometheus. They've only been successfully developed in recent years. The Thunder Tower Master smirked and waved his hand. In an instant, the strange creatures that filled the room. Prometheus sprang out crazily and grabbed onto the outer wall of the tower. Then they began to climb down on all fours and rush down crazily. Upon seeing this, Hui Yao frowned. He was about to wave the magic wand in his hand, but he couldn't move his arm. He couldn't help but be stunned. His body was already entangled by many transparent threads. This won't do. The Thunder Tower Master's palm was also entangled with the transparent threads of the tree roots. He moved his fingers, and those threads instantly tightened, binding Hui Yao's entire body. This gift hasn't been fully opened yet, Hui Yao. So, it's just a spiritual projection that came back. No wonder it's so easy to catch him. But then again, it's just a spiritual projection. Hui Yao, you've really become arrogant. Suddenly, a shrill voice faintly came from below. In the square in front of the lobby of the Magicians' Association, an inhuman was directly pressed on top of a monster. And this monster that suddenly appeared was actually constantly tearing and devouring the inhuman's flesh and blood. He looked up, subconsciously. From the tower of the Magicians' Association's headquarters, monsters that seemed to have figured it out were crazily crawling down like locusts. After changing back to their original clothes, Long Shirwa and Luo Dance didn't stay for long and planned to go back to the living room. Miss Butterfly Monster looked a little excited and walked briskly in front. Upon seeing this, Kelowna's Shinryu complained, "You'll lose your value if you take the initiative." Little Butterfly Monster, who didn't quite understand the meaning of this sentence, turned back. Master Shinryu simply waved his hand disdainfully. "Go, go, go! Sister Long, hurry up!" This small episode didn't affect the mood of the little Butterfly Monster at this moment, and she trotted all the way. Long Shirwa shook her head and then glanced at the bag in her hand. Inside was the shirt and jeans that she had just changed out of. She muttered to herself in a low voice, "I've already washed it." "No, I haven't washed it at all." "Well, it's barely folded. Take it back." "No, isn't it a bit too?" "Ahem. I don't need it anymore. I'll give it back to you. Don't put on those messy clothes for me in the future." "Tut! I don't believe that I'll be stuck here forever." As she muttered, she had already walked to the door of the living room. She saw the little Butterfly Monster directly push the door open and then said with a surprised look, "Wow, Sister Yu Yi, you're also here." Kelowna Shinryu's mouth suddenly twitched. Then she subconsciously threw the bag with the clothes in her hand up to the ceiling. Then she stared with her dead fish eyes in short. She didn't have a good expression and slowly walked in. Looking at this Butterfly Monster who seemed to have forgotten her mother because of her father, Kelowna Shinryu secretly scolded, "Zhongshan Butterfly, you're helping outsiders." "Sit down, Miss Long. I've also prepared some snacks for you." Boss Luo smiled and made an inviting gesture at this time. Kelowna Shinryu pretended not to see, directly kicking Huang Jinlong, who was lying on the sofa, and then sat down, taking out a cigarette box. Unexpectedly, not only Luochio and Miss Maid, but also the little Butterfly Monster, curiously, looked at this Kelowna Shinryu. Shinryu stared back at them. Her face was full of displeasure. "What are you looking at? Haven't you seen a woman smoking?" Luochio gave a start, then waved his hand. An ashtray appeared on the small tea table next to her seat. That was very considerate of him. But at this moment, the true dragon of Shenzhou took back the cigarette case as if it was against him. She shrugged. "I'm not in the mood now." Sister Long looks like a child in a fit of pique. Seeing this, the little butterfly monster didn't have any scruples. She was the type that spoke whatever came to her mind. Naturally, she didn't know how to recognize the atmosphere, which made the real dragon's face turn green. Zhongshan butterfly. She secretly made a drill with her finger, which scared the little butterfly monster, and she quickly held the teacup covering her mouth. She sat up straight, but her back was trembling. How's the sweetness? This is specially prepared by Yi. Boss Luo smiled to ease the atmosphere. I used Chinese roses picked from outside. They're quite fresh. Yes. The little butterfly monster smiled sweetly to Miss Maid. Thank you, Sister Yi. Miss Maid chuckled. There's still some fresh ones over there. I'll give them to you later. Okay. The little butterfly monster felt a chill on her back and showed a limited smile, changing the topic. I'm on a diet recently. I don't want it. Well, that's a pity, Miss Maid said regretfully, but she didn't blame her. However, learning to manage your body is also a reflection of growing up. It's not bad. Remember to keep your appearance so that the person you like will feel different every day. Is that so? The little butterfly monster thought. Miss Maid continued. In fact, you don't need to dress up. You just need to keep clean. Of course, if you can keep smiling, you won't look unapproachable. You just need to pay attention to your hair, clothes, and so on. You won't look sloppy. In fact, your current appearance is already very good. Intentionally or not, the servant girl looked at the true dragon and smiled. Miss Dragon, do you think I'm right? Fancy flowers. Kelowna's Shinryu snorted, holding her cheek and turning away. Country people don't have so many tricks. Then she secretly glanced at her hair. Oh, there's mixed hair. Boss Luo looked at Miss Maid, shaking his head slightly, and then said softly, By the way, Miss Long, do you know why Teresa fainted? I'm talking about her. This woman? Long Shirua glanced at Teresa, who had not woken up yet. Only then did she know her name. Shinryu rolled his eyes. Didn't you say you came here first? Since you know her, how can I know what happened to her if you don't know it yourself? Anyway, she was like this when we arrived. She was bitten on her neck. Don't you know what happened? We weren't here at that time. Boss Luo shook his head. Long Shirua frowned. Why? Do you suspect that I have something to do with this? Luocho looked at her eyes. The Miss Long I know, of course, won't do this kind of thing. Of course, I suspect you. Her pretty face blushed. Kelowna's Shinryu couldn't help thinking that it must be the residue of the Zhongshan butterfly's powder in the water. She held her cheek and turned away. I don't know either. Indeed, when he came here, he saw her lying on the ground. I looked around the house and didn't find anything. Then you guys came back. I see. Luocho pondered. What's your relationship with this woman? You seem to care about her. Kelowna's Shinryu glanced at him and asked indifferently. She's my companion on this trip. Boss Luo said casually. Although we don't have a good relationship, it's our fault for not taking care of her. She felt that this profiteer's current state was a little strange, although there were many criticisms in her heart. But from their previous interactions, she had to admit that this profiteer was quite good at taking care of his customers. It's just a little bit of HP. With your ability, you can save her even if she dies. Why are you so concerned? It's not all your fault. Kelowna's Shinryu said impatiently, but it was comforting. Thank you. Boss Luo smiled. Her pretty face blushed. It must be because the residue wasn't completely removed. Yes, it must be. /1 M. Chapter 1364. The problem about Teresa was put aside for the time being. She wasn't related to him anyway. Long Shirua was thinking about Hui Yao at this time. It seemed that this guy had left for some time. According to Hui Yao's speed, it shouldn't take long for him to go back and forth. Every second he stayed would make him feel uncomfortable. Kelowna's Shinryu sighed secretly. He didn't expect to be in such a dilemma. He wasn't a young girl who didn't know anything. How could he not know what was going on? He just couldn't get over it. Indeed, Shinryu wasn't the kind of person who always liked to be in a disadvantageous position. Humph. It's just that after being single for a long time, he felt that everything was beautiful and had an illusion. Long Shirua calmed down and then said, "What's your relationship with Fafner? If I'm not wrong, you should have known each other before." "Miss Long, are you here for Milo-chan this time?" Luocho asked. He already knew from Miss Maid's explanation that the current state of the Golden Dragon's corpse was caused by Shinryu. "Milo-chan," Long Shiro couldn't help but be startled. "It seems that you really know this pervert. You even know his boring side business." Luocho smiled and said, "It's probably fate. The world is very strange, just like how we met Miss Long here." Kelowna's Shinryu suddenly stared at him. "Who's fated with you?" Boss Luo didn't care about this attitude. "So, is there anything special that you came to Fafner this time?" Sister Long came this time to help Fafner give birth to a child. The little butterfly monster heard this and easily sold out the purpose of Kelowna's visit to Shinryu. "Zhongshan butterfly." Shinryu couldn't help but stare at this butterfly again. He always felt that this thing would be abducted sooner or later. "Have children." Boss Luo opened his mouth slightly. Of course, he wouldn't think of it that way. He just felt that the way she put it was rather subtle. "Don't overthink it." At this moment, Shinryu couldn't calm down. His originally cold face suddenly became hot again. Long Shirua almost blurted it out. She glared at him and said, "I only owe him a favor, so I came here to carry on the Golden Dragon's ancestral line. Bah! Help it give birth. I mean, help it mate successfully." His tongue seemed to be in a knot, and he couldn't figure it out. No matter which way he put it, it would always have a subtle effect. At this moment, the true dragon of the godly land was really going crazy. Seeing this, Boss Luo smiled and said, "I heard that the last golden dragon is in a state of fertility difficulties, and the Magician Association has been distressed for a long time. Miss Long is here to solve this problem, right?" "You can say that. Have you found a way to solve it?" Luo Chou asked. Shinryu shook his head and said subconsciously, "No, this thing is a bit, how should I put it, a gender disorder. But even so, if it still has male instincts, there will always be a way. But I didn't expect it to cut itself off. That's really—" Boss Luo heard this and slightly opened his mouth. He subconsciously looked at the golden dragon that was occupied by Shinryu and thrown to the ground. "It's over. I just asked a question casually, and they blew everything out of the blue. It's really over." Yes, not only did it not help Mr. Fafner, but it also caused him to go berserk. The little butterfly sighed. "I always feel sorry for Mr. Hui Yao." "It's over. Besides self-destructing, this Zhongshan butterfly was going to continue to betray me." Kelowna's Shinryu couldn't even stop it in time. "Hui Yao!" Luocho suddenly said, "Is he a white-robed young man who looks very approachable and has a very long magic wand in his hand?" Luo Dance asked curiously, "Boss, do you know Mr. Hui Yao?" Luocho smiled and said, "You can say that we've met once." So Miss Long's so-called return of a favor is referring to this Mr. Hui Yao? "Why are you so nosy about my affairs?" Kelowna's Shinryu snorted. Luocho said casually, "Because I can't help but want to know more about Miss Long." Kelowna's Shinryu's breathing suddenly stopped for a moment. He couldn't help but say angrily, "What nonsense are you talking about? Aren't you afraid that you, a maid, will trouble me?" "It doesn't matter to me." Miss Maid covered her mouth and chuckled. "I'm happy to see Master interested in something." It was like being trapped in a swamp that he couldn't get out of. And it was a whirlpool-like swamp created by the Master and the Maid. At this moment, the true dragon of the godly land felt as if she was about to be dragged into the depths of a swamp, or like a commodity on display. This sense of danger made her sober up all of a sudden. The power of Shinryu in her body began to cleanse her body from top to bottom. After the blessing of this ancient power, her spirit was suddenly emptied. She slowly sighed and suddenly retorted, "Really? You want to know more about me? That's easy. Then come to my hospital and I can give you a discount. Dance. Next time when you see these two coming to register, remember to bring out 2 folding stools. Don't let them stand and wait. It's impolite." "Oh, okay," the little butterfly monster subconsciously responded. Kelowna's Shinryu felt that this butterfly belonged to the Long family and not the Luo family. She suddenly felt relieved. Unexpectedly, the little butterfly monster immediately said, "But Sister Long, when does the hospital register? There are usually no patients, so there's no need to line up." The true dragon, who had finally calmed down under the cleansing of the true dragon's power, suddenly felt terrible again. The true dragon, who had already given up on the Zhongshan butterfly, turned to look at Luo Qiu as if she didn't hear anything. "Anyway, I'll take Fafnir away," she said indifferently. "If you want to take action, hurry up. Even if you can't beat it, I won't wait for death. Don't dilly-dally." She seemed to be unafraid of death. "But I've never said that I'll leave it." Luocho smiled and said, "If Miss Long wants to take it away, you shouldn't ask for my opinion, but its own opinion." "How dare it? Wait, your goal is not Fafnir?" Long Shiroa was in disbelief. "For now, yes," Boss Luo said ambiguously. Kelowna's Shinryu pondered for a moment and then looked at him with suspicion. She did not see what this profiteer was selling. She thought for a moment and said, "You really won't do anything behind my back?" Boss Luo could not help but ask curiously, "Miss Long, in your opinion, are we really so untrustworthy? I remember that Miss Long has also used our service before." Shinryu snorted. "Since you don't plan to take Fafnir away, that's naturally the best. Don't worry, we're waiting for someone. When that person arrives, we'll leave immediately." "You're waiting for Mr. Hui Yao?" Luocho suddenly asked. Long Shiroa did not answer. It was a tacit agreement. Luocho then said, "If that's the case, then I'm afraid this matter will be somewhat delayed. That Mr. Hui Yao seems to be in trouble." "What's the matter?" Kelowna's Shinryu frowned slightly. Luocho waved his hand in front of him. A light screen that was half the height of a person slowly began to extend out from the sofa area, a curved screen. Boss Luo, who had already lost to Miss, Maid naturally did not intend to continue blocking his perception. It was like reopening the social media app. All kinds of messages that he received but did not receive any notifications directly flooded the screen. When the light screen was completely expanded into a semicircle, looking at the scene that appeared on the screen, the little butterfly suddenly exclaimed, "It's Mr. Hui Yao!" "What's going on?" Looking at the screen, Hui Yao's body seemed to be restrained by something. He seemed to be confronting someone. Long Shiroa frowned immediately. Luocho tapped his finger, and the images on the screen instantly split. Not only did they see the person who attacked Hui Yao, but they could also see some of the things that were happening in the headquarters of the Magician Association. This Mr. Hui Yao seems to have met his former enemy. Boss Luo's heart moved, and the image of the Thunder Tower Master on the screen began to enlarge. "This is Thunder. He's also one of the Tower Masters. He probably won't attack Hui Yao. I'm afraid this old man is not the Thunder Tower Master that you know, Miss Long." Luocho then said, "This Mr. Hui Yao, please address him as Yaris." "Yaris? It's this guy?" Kelowna's Shinryu was stunned. After that, he did not say anything and just frowned as if he was thinking about something. "Sister Long, do you know him as well?" The little butterfly monster was confused and somewhat panicked. This was because on the other set of images, a bloody scene appeared in the Magician Association. A group of strange creatures were wantonly slaughtering and tearing apart the Inhumans. It was not that these Inhumans did not resist, but this group of strange creatures had a terrifying recovery ability. Even if they were blown up to the point that only their heads were left, they could quickly recover through cell division. This was unexpected. Moreover, These strange creatures directly charged into the crowd. Many of the Inhumans were injured because they were accidentally injured. Because of this, the Inhumans in the outer area could not use a wider range of attacks or attacks that were too powerful, resulting in such a miserable situation. Moreover, there was a lack of people who could give orders on the spot. It was almost a mess. Yaris is Hui Yao's first teacher. Long Shirua said quickly. Hui Yao was Yari's student at that time. Later, something happened, so he left Europe to cultivate. Yaris was not only Hui Yao's first teacher, but also the first tower master of the Secret Arts Tower when the Inhuman Realm was not completed and the Magician Association was still stationed in the modern world. But the current first tower master is Mr. Hui Yao. Luo Dance blinked her eyes. There was an internal strife in the association. It was many years ago, even more than Long Shirua said. She suddenly looked at the club's boss and the maid, then shook her head and said, "That year, Hui Yao was the winner of the civil strife, and Yaris was exiled after his magic power was abolished. At that time, Yari's magic power was abolished. I saw it with my own eyes. I didn't expect that after so many years, he could still make a comeback. What's wrong with these monsters? I feel like I've seen them somewhere." "Miss Long, you've seen them before," Luochio suddenly said. "I've seen them before?" Shinryu was stunned. Then he frowned and thought of something. "You mean at that time?" Boss Luo nodded. "Ah, Mr. Hui Yao looks very dangerous." Little Butterfly pointed at the screen at this time. At this moment, Hui Yao's body seemed to be eroded by something, and his expression was slightly painful. Kelowna's Shinryu frowned. "What's the matter? Is he afraid of Thunder's body?" Without much hesitation, Shinryu's power burst out instantly, and a golden airflow flowed on Long Shirua's body. "Dance, stay here and wait for me to come back." Seeing that Kelowna's Shinryu was about to break through the villa's ceiling and rush out, Boss Luo suddenly said, "Miss Long, if you rush over now, how long will it take?" Shinryu's feet had just left the ground when he suddenly stopped. "What are you trying to do?" "Do you need me to send you over?" Boss Luo suggested. "It'll only take about 1 second. Profiteer, you're actually robbing a burning house." Kelowna's Shinryu looked at him in disbelief. Boss Luo shook his head and said, "If you really have such thoughts, then my suggestion would probably be, do you need us to solve this problem, or something like that. Don't worry, this teleportation is a free experience. We just hope that Miss Long will be satisfied with our service and slightly change your opinion of us." Long Shirua believed that if she rushed over at full speed, she would be able to arrive in a short time. After all, Fafnir only took a few hours to go crazy and destroy all the way to this place. The Inhuman territory was actually not vast, and the Inhumans were actually squeezed in such a small place and lived carefully. But even if it was a short time, there might be more unexpected situations. Obviously, a short time was not as safe as a second. The premise was that she wanted to enjoy the other party's free service. Although it was free, she still borrowed the other party's power, which made Shinryu extremely unhappy. Free? Good. I like free lunches the most. Then what are you waiting for? Why aren't you doing it? Don't worry. I'll give you a good review later. But at least she couldn't lose in words. I hope Miss Long can solve this problem smoothly. Boss Luo waved his hand and said, "But please remember, no matter when, no matter what kind of trouble you encounter, as long as Miss Long needs me, I will appear in front of you." After their eyes met, both of them disappeared from each other's sight. The moment Luochio disappeared from her sight, Long Shirua couldn't help but sigh. She felt like a prey that had stepped into a trap and was slowly falling into the hunter's trap. In the next moment, when Kelowna's Shinryu appeared in the square of the Magician Association headquarters, Kelowna's Shinryu suddenly had an unexpected thought. Speaking of which, why didn't I ask him to directly teleport radiance? So angry.